Good evening and welcome to Village Hall. Tonight is the annual joint meeting of the Pleasantville Village Board and the Pleasantville School Board. So we alternate year by year. 1 year it's at the school, 1 year it's here. This is our year to host, so we welcome all of you.
Thanks for having us.
On our side, Joe Stargiati was unable to be here tonight. On your side, Larry Bose.
Couldn't be here.
Present but not immediately visible is school board member Shane McGaffey, who is behind the camera, but we have resolved to say at least a few things that will encourage him to comment. So just so everybody is aware, a few other people in the audience joining us tonight. On the village side, Police Chief Eric Grutzner and the school district folks. We've got Tim Whipple, the Assistant Superintendent for Business. Have I got that
that's
right?
right. Mm-hmm.
Veronica Shea and Julie Schwartz. So welcome all. So we'll have a few opportunities for folks to comment in the course of the evening. And if anyone at home is watching, we have a call-in number 769-1677. If you are so moved, feel free to call in. But let's start with a public comment session. I think we have some folks who have something they might want to say while they have a captive audience of the two boards. If you guys could let us know your names and address so you appear properly in the record.
Hi, we're Clara, Zach, and Eli Nielsen Papish. We live on 21 Guyon Street in here. And we are 3 students at Pleasantville Middle School. And when we realized how much wasted food scraps were being incinerated from our cafeteria, we thought something was wrong. And we had been composting at our house for quite some time. So we thought it would be a great opportunity to bring composting to the middle school.
Yeah, and when we looked into how we might be able to do this,
To the mic.
we immediately thought of the new food scrap recycling program in town, and we know that right now it's only residential, but we were hoping that maybe you could make an exception for the middle school. Yeah.
We talked to Pleasantville Recycles, Mr. Mara, Nicole Asquith, and Eric Morsi, and we figured out that one of our main problems is transportation, because we have no way of bringing the food scraps from the school to a composting place.
Before introducing, we have some of the garbage cans. We can have garbage cans with food scraps before we actually have the compost bins, just to practice. And we could have 8th graders monitor the compost bins for community service hours, because a lot of 8th graders are desperate for those.
Yeah, and we could have student council make posters to raise awareness or like make it an award system too. And we can look at how John Jay and some of the other schools in the area did this and use them as like a blueprint, so.
And we would love some support or any suggestions.
Well, I thank you for that. Certainly on behalf of the village board, an impressive idea and an impressive opening discussion of it. So as you already commented, the village has started a food scraps program that allows folks to collect food scraps at home and bring them on Saturdays between 9 and 3 to the recycling center where we have bins for drop-off. Brief shout out. You can visit the 3rd floor of Village Hall at any time, and for $25 buy a kit that includes a bigger bin for storage of what you collect over time and a smaller bin that fits on the countertop and comes with a starter set of compostable bags. That's $25. You can pick it up at the 3rd floor of Village Hall. Our sales representative is not on commission. Noreen Regan has quite a collection of them. So really hope everybody will participate. It started off, I think, pretty impressively, but as you guys already pointed out, we have a contract with a carter who picks them up, and it's strictly for residential stuff. So when we get to the institutional side of things, that requires some rethinking.
Can I say a couple of things? Because I've spoken to these guys, so I did a little bit of homework, because I know that there is right now a green team that has been working at BRS, and that includes Ryan Lamberg, who's also part of Pleasantville Recycles, Ben Sarabin, and they've been working with Peggy Galati, and I believe there are a couple of people on the PTA, and they have sort of a list of goals, and one of them is to reinstate composting at BRS and ultimately at all of the schools. At one point, BRS did compost, and then, if I understand it correctly, it was, and Mary, you can you can fill me in because I'm sure you know the story better than I do, but it was deemed to be sort of logistically complicated. So they've been doing a fair amount of looking into this. There's a woman named Ashley Weld from We Future Cycle, who is a consultant throughout Westchester at schools that want to be doing this. And so she's actually visited a couple of times BRS and has looked into this. I know one of the issues in order to really be able to do food composting on a sort of regular scale, regular basis, is that the things that the food gets served on would have to be compostable. So that's one of the things that you can make note of that has to be looked into. But my understanding, I know, so this is a question for the school board. I know that you have a contract with a new carting company. I know the one that you had in the past had an option for composting. Do you know if the current company does that or not?
Yes, sure. First of all, can I tell you, I'm just so proud of the three of you, right? Let's give them a big round of applause for coming up. It takes, standing in front of a group of people, the press is here, you're on TV, live audience can hear the three of you. Not to put a little pressure, but I am just so proud. Well done. All right, well done. So, and you certainly have picked a wonderful topic, one that's near and dear to our hearts. There's in my brain when you were talking about it, it's like, because we do have that small composting bin in the edible garden in the middle school. Maybe I should see Noreen and get one of the bags to help feed that one as a, thank you, Noreen, as a first step in the right direction, because we do try to do that and teach that as part of that edible garden program in the middle school. So we have a new food service contract, and they do take, I have trouble with this word, I think, because I've been talking all weekend at a very happy event yesterday. Compostable. Right, Tim, here I go. I couldn't do it all day. What's wrong with me? All right, so compostable material. So our forks and knives and trays, et cetera, are all that. That's in the new contract. And our commercial or large scale or industrial carting and garbage company does for $350, I think it is, a month per school. So about for $15,000 a year, they will take it away. But they've got rules and regulations before that happens. And when we did try it at Bedford Road School, sadly, if everything wasn't 100% perfect, they put the bags in the garbage.
Right, got rejected.
So that was a concern to us. So after all that effort, after I have kindergarten students scraping out the last of their yogurt in a plastic piece, and it maybe getting into the bucket and not getting into the bucket, and our custodians cleaning up all of that, and we put all this big effort, and we had, and then to see if one of them, I know, sorry, I'm getting a little anime because this is a great topic, they would just take the entire bag and just put it into the garbage. So, which tells me that we're on a road of progress, right? And improvements take multiple steps, and sometimes it's an iterative process to go back and to look at it again. So right now, from our carting company, that's a data point that in order to get a large commercial vendor who will do the composting for us, and they want it to be in certain cooled conditions, and some places require chillers or refrigerators because they would only pick up once a week for it. And from our school district, that's a lot. However, I will say proudly, with all of our hydration stations, we have incredibly decreased the amount of water bottles. I'm thrilled. I want to give a shout out to Mr. Whipple for the new contract with our food service to make sure everything is compostable. Just to give you an example, the knives and forks cost about $47 a case. If you get the plastic ones, it's like $17 a case. So we buy the compostable ones, the compostable trays, everything, and we have a single stream, and the goal is that the carter that does take it separates accordingly and will compost the materials. That's our hope, because we're spending good money to have that happen. But is there room for an improvement? Absolutely. And you know what? I have a strong feeling with 3 individual students like yourselves, we're going to be on that road to improvement. My first stop will be Noreen.
All right.
I will say that one thing that was really important for the village in putting this composting program in place was working with consultants who were able to really streamline the process. So I think one of the reasons that I was sold that this was going to work well is because of these kits that have been heavily researched. The team in Scarsdale who sort of modeled this program for us, they tried out lots of different containers, lots of different liners and everything until they got the ones that were the most efficient and worked the well. And then education, of course, is a big part of it as well, because as you said, you can't contaminate. You can't have plastic bags in there, then it's no longer compostable. So having that process, so working with, I guess there's this consultant, I don't know her personally, but she's able to help, but working with somebody who really can streamline that whole process makes it, I think, much more manageable.
And then for us, particularly at the elementary school, it was a staffing issue. We're a lean machine in terms of Mr. Chamberlain and his staff, and sometimes, especially with the much younger students, we had, and Nicole is right, the type of receptacle that the liquid waste would go into, whether it was milk or leftover applesauce or yogurt. The education to scrape it out, get it in. Half of it sometimes ended up on the floor, the cleanup of all of that. So there was an awful lot of energy and time and effort spent on working on that. And it was a great first step, but we learned some lessons about what not to do moving forward. Right.
But maybe middle school, do you think maybe it would make more sense to actually start it at the middle school level than at the elementary school level? Because I don't know, I'm just listening to you talk. I'm wondering if, because you don't have
What she means is our middle school students neater than...
We love our little kids, the younger ones. It's okay. It's, all good steps. Again, that's a question to go back and ask Mr. Chamberlain and the square footage of our vendor that happens to have the cafeteria, where the serving lines are, where we happen to have egress and entry, because that also became an issue in terms of where do you place these materials and still maintain the flow and all the other things that you need to in a space. And the middle school cafeteria is now, it's our oldest one, and it is the smallest of the lot. It actually, yeah.
And so our budget cycle will be starting in January. I mean, this is something we would have to look at from a budgetary standpoint as well, because having a consultant like Future Cycle is not an insignificant cost. So the consulting fees, all the equipment, and then the monthly carting fees add up. So we would have to take a look at that and see what those costs would be, and if they could fit into the budget, and maybe on a smaller scale to begin with. But I don't know. This is a larger conversation that we would need to have as a board.
Yeah. Right.
It's a good time to bring it to us.
It's a great idea.
So, and on our side of the table, obviously our circumstances are different because we're dealing with residences, and you guys have these cafeterias, which obviously are a different animal, but there's a cost for us associated with doing this. We hope that over time it builds up to the point that it's offset to some degree by less tonnage brought to the county transfer site. And the interesting piece of it, which hopefully folks will start to see in their own homes, is first off, you can compost a whole lot of stuff that you couldn't compost in your own backyard. These industrial compost sites, you can put in paper towels, you can put in bones, you can put in eggshells and shells from shellfish, all kinds of stuff. But it becomes a kind of shocking to realize that if you're successful about recycling things that were already part of the recyclable stream, but then also start recycling this stuff, there's not too much left to pick up for the weekly trash pickup. So in an interesting way, it becomes its own sort of incentive to say, whoa, now I want to make sure, let's do better next week. So I thank you guys for that, for multiple reasons, one of which is it highlights this program that we've gotten started here on the residential side, and hope that more and more people will adopt. And secondly, you've highlighted the issue in the schools. We obviously have this issue in restaurants and food stores, and hopefully we can morph towards a world where these kinds of composting programs are just standard practice for everybody. And with the likes of the three of you, I'd say that's inevitable. So
Right.
thank you.
And I do want to add that when I look back on even the water bottles, because they were all over the place. I walked the campus all the time, and the idea to put in the hydration stations goes back a number of years, but it started in the middle school. There were a group of middle school students who saw it someplace else and had this idea and approached a teacher, and it started. Now they're all over the place, and it's made a significant impact on water bottles, a huge impact. So we are always on this journey, and it's a great journey beyond, and I know we're in a good shape with students like yourself, so thank you.
Well, and remember, these things are a process. Anytime you want to do something and you come to government, and it's always more complex than it seems, but don't give up.
Maybe we should let them know what the next steps are, because I don't want them to leave feeling, so one recommendation I would have, and I've said this to you guys separately, is that you definitely reach out to the green team at BRS that's already working on this. I know that long term, what they would see as an ideal situation is to reduce waste altogether by not even having compostable plates, but going old school and going back to trays that can be put in a dishwasher. So that would be like really the long-term goal, and then obviously the food would be. But that's one thing I would recommend to you guys, because I know they've already been researching that. And I don't know if anybody else has suggestions for next steps.
Well, when we built the Bedford Road School, I still call it the new Bedford Road School because I've been here for 30 years. That building opened in 2003, and there was a big discussion on whether or not we put in a dishwasher to do that, and it does come up. But a commercial dishwasher is expensive. You have storage for all the plates, then you hire a staffing person, you have someone who would be dedicated just to that. So it becomes a cost analysis in terms of what we need to do. So when we meet and we sit down with our teams and administrators, I have 3 concentric circles. The first circle, what's a must-have? And what's a must-have to make sure that the educational program for our students is delivered. And in terms of how we approach the arts and how we approach athletics, but that's the must-have, and the board is well versed in this. Then outside of that, it's important to have, and then what's nice to have, and sometimes we have to make decisions based upon priorities and staffing. We're very lucky in Pleasantville that we have an enrollment that's stable, which means people want to move into town and have their kids come here and grow. But we're open to re-looking at different ideas, but the idea of the dishwasher and plates, we've looked at it multiple times, but it's an increased staffing issue, it's a purchase issue, it's a storage issue. We'd have to address all of the costs associated with those things and do a cost-benefit analysis in the long run. So again, I think David said it best. Government and process is multi-stage and multi-level, and we have to look at all of those things. So the first step I would say is that, the board certainly has the information on what it would take from suburban carting to do recycling. And then, because I don't remember, we'd have to go back and take a look at what the consultant reported about the footage in the middle school cafeteria and what kind of bins were required there and where they would go to take a look at that. So those would be some next steps, and then what else we can do. I would certainly encourage, and maybe we can do this through our program, if we could do some level of maybe making posters or some public service announcements that you could encourage, students and others on how to go about recycling and composting, not only at school but at home, and how can we help the village initiative about what they're doing here. So clearly through art classes, or maybe making a small video that we can put out on Facebook, all of those things would be very helpful.
Could we give you guys a concrete challenge, something you could actually do for us? How many do you have sitting in your office right now? How many do I have left to sell total? Correct.
200.
So could you
Just
find
about, give or take.
100 classmates and get them to buy and start composting, because that will make a significant difference. And
In their
you can do
homes,
that
this
today.
is.
In their home.
Right.
It would have to be village
It has to be
residents.
village residents.
That's
To
the
be
tricky
village
part, yeah.
The plus side is you do not have to buy this kit to participate.
Yes.
If
That's
you're
true.
a
You
don't have to buy the
resident.
kit.
I'm clear on that in all my
Oh,
sales.
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
But to,
It's
if
just
you-
very
But
convenient.
Kit
But
helps.
it's a very convenient
Yes.
kit, and it's tested, but don't have that hold you back from
Because
participating.
while you're working on the middle school, and don't give up, you can do something today that will increase the level of composting in the village, and will decrease the waste that gets incinerated, and we've got it already. So that would be really helpful.
good idea.
I might add to that, people throw out a shocking amount of food in
Oh.
their own lives, and no doubt in cafeterias and restaurants and all of the
Right.
above. And if, as a world, we could morph towards more reasonable portions and not taking stuff you're not likely to eat, and shout out to parents who send their kids with things they're probably not going to eat, all those things help. But it is, the statistics, you may have a better handle on them. The statistics of the percentage of food produced in the United States that's wasted is just staggering. And wasted is a combination of people buying it and not eating it, it going out of dates on a grocery shelf,
Right.
whatever it might be. But
Right.
I mean, it is a staggering number.
Well, that's one of the things
Yeah.
that the Scarsdale people pointed out, and it's true. Like once you start composting all food, you become much more aware of the food that you're wasting, right?
Very true.
Because you're actually putting it in that bucket. And so then the next time you go to the grocery store, you think, am I going to just buy these random things that I might make as meals, or am I just going to buy what I know I'm going to make as a meal and really reduce the amount of waste? By the way, they don't charge anything, this team at Scarsdale, and they are super helpful. So they are people that you could potentially, we'd be happy to put you in touch with them
they're
too.
missionaries for their,
I bet they could help you.
The
come up with
consultants
some
that
it
Scarsdale
was
is
Yeah.
a volunteer group
Yeah,
that got
the whole
going.
thing was
Yeah.
built by
Really quite amazing.
Okay.
All right, any
That's
more on
great.
that? Did you guys have anything further to add?
See us
Well-
when you need your college recommendations. Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
College recommendations, we
Thank
need you
you.
to run
Thanks,
for.
guys.
Thank you.
Run for the school
Thank
board and the
you.
village board.
Thank you.
Thank you guys, much appreciated.
Thank you.
So, thank you for that. I realize we probably should have all introduced ourselves around the table, or I could do that. Not everyone watches both boards. Noreen Regan is over there at that end of things, administrative aide on the third floor. Eric Morrissey, our administrator. Village board members David Vinjamori, Nicole Asquith, Steve Lord, Peter Shearer. Missing tonight is Joe Stargiotti. You want to pick up on your side?
Sure, I'm Angela Vella, Lou Conti, we have Emily Rubin Persons, and Mary Foxalter.
All right. So the first item on our agenda was a discussion about the 2020 census, and that arose on our side in part because, as folks probably know, it's a constitutional requirement that there be a census done every 10 years, and that census is used for all kinds of things, not only congressional representation, but it ends up being used in all kinds of different ways, including the receipt of federal aid to individual communities, as well as the possibility that a state or a region might end up with more or less congressional representation. So we had a visit a couple of weeks ago by Norma Drummond, who's the Commissioner of Planning in Westchester County, and she provided a PowerPoint presentation, which is actually up on our website at pleasantville-ny.gov, also available on the county planning website at westchestergov.com, and she walked through a bunch of aspects of the mechanics of this year's 2020, or the forthcoming 2020 census, which will be the first one where they anticipate a large number of people will be able to respond electronically on their computer, even potentially on their smartphone, and will not have to send in a paper form. But the really, really, really important takeaway was the critical need to get an accurate and full count. Norma is of the belief, based on county planning studies, that Westchester County almost certainly is a county of over 1 million people, but was undercounted in the census by perhaps 100,000 people. And correct me if I recall this wrong, but I think her number was every single body in the census in Westchester County accounts for $2,500 per year in federal aid.
Right.
So that an undercount of 100,000 is a staggering loss of federal aid to the county on an annual basis. And so there's a high incentive for folks to be accurately counted. So at any rate, just wanted to highlight that and sort of commit both of our boards to every
Right.
possible thing we can do to assist in a full count. There is concern on county planning's part that the federal conflict over the question of citizenship on the census form could depress response among some communities, and Norma was at pains to point out that that citizenship question was struck and is not included
Right.
in the census, but she went through the logistics of how the whole thing will go, and there is obviously a great incentive for communities to both verify addresses and assist the census takers in trying to get full counts, but also in maximizing electronic response and reducing the need for folks to end up knocking on doors, which is the hardest and most difficult piece of it. So at any rate, that led on our side to just a brief look of what the census has looked like for us. And I put together a few quick slides, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, but just some interesting stuff came to mind. Let me knock off one of these lights there. Can you get it?
Thank you to you guys for bringing this to light. I think it is important that you as the village and us
Yeah,
as
that's
the
good.
school district do what we can
Yeah.
to try and get people to,
Participate.
participate and give their information without fear of repercussions, because it really is important to really get an accurate count. I mean, obviously
And as we start to
monetarily,
think,
but
right, as we start to
also-
think about the numbers, the dynamics of the population are obviously critical to all of us. To
Absolutely.
you guys in terms
Right.
of the demographic changes and what you
Students and-
anticipate.
number of students.
To us, I mean, certainly we've had folks say to us, there's various projects going around, that this feels like stratospheric growth in the village. What does that really look like? So at any rate, just a real quick look to give people a sense for what the numbers look like. This is the population based on the census in Pleasantville from 1940 to the present. And as you can see, there was this big spike, as there was in Westchester County as a whole, between 1950 and 1970. But interestingly, in 1970, the village population was, this is just the village, not the school district, 7,110. And it actually dropped by 5% in 1980 from that high, and then dropped by another 2% in 1990, rebounded by 9% in the year 2000, dropped by 2% in the year 2010. So the 2010 census suggested that the village population was about 100 less than it was 40 years earlier. Then the 2017 numbers are estimated. Those come from the American Community Survey, which is a demographic survey done by the federal government, but it is based on a small sample and an extrapolation of what that might mean. That came up with a population of potentially 72-25. So just an interesting piece of data, especially in comparison to what you'll see in a moment, that Pleasantville's population has been comparatively stable, all within a range of about 100-150 people for about 50 years. So the next slide shows the Mount Pleasant population. So that's the town outside the villages. So that's Mount Pleasant population. The unincorporated area does not include the village. So obviously this is some sort of a suggestion of the piece of the school district in the town outside, but not in the village. But as you can see here,
more steady growth.
they experienced this really big growth, 1950 to 1970. Pleasantville went up, say, 40, 50, 60%. Mount Pleasant pretty much doubled in size over a period of 30 years. And then in every 10-year census since has grown, 14%, 6%, 6%, 4%, 3%. And that American Community Survey 2017 estimate shows a potential 9% growth. So just an interesting number,
Right.
and particularly interesting in the context of what we know about school enrollments, which in some communities is dropping. In Pleasantville, more or less stable recently.
Yep.
But anyway, so the next slide shows
Peter,
the,
just for
Oh,
one quick
yeah.
question, only because I find this fascinating, so educate me here. That period, but between 1950 and 1970, that period of great growth, actually saw the establishment of new public school districts that took in those kids from Mount Pleasant.
Right, Byram Hills
Byram
and-
Hills, parts of Chappaqua,
Yeah, right,
parts
yeah.
of Mount Pleasant. So
Right.
the school district, we went back and researched it, couldn't house all of
Oh, I'm
these
sure.
populations. I mean, there were fascinating board minutes to read about how they were thinking of making the high school only grades 10 through 12 or how to limit and then around us you saw central school districts. So I think that it's interesting because that chart then in that town of Mount Pleasant indicates the reason why those school districts developed.
Popped up.
Yeah,
Popped up.
yeah.
Fascinating.
Well, and the very stratospheric growth in those first 3-4 decades, I assume, without knowing for sure, represents the fact that Mount Pleasant was more rural in character
Land.
in 1940,
Right.
and then
Land.
and then there were all those
Right.
subdivisions that occurred. So,
Right.
at any rate, the next slide shows Westchester County as a whole. Just kind of an interesting point of comparison. A line that looks a little more like the Pleasantville line,
Yeah.
but with again a drop as Pleasantville showed of 3% in 1980, but then consistent growth ever since. And again, per Norma, it may be that all these numbers are on undercount. Certainly, the suggestion is that mostly the heavily urbanized areas are the toughest to count, and
Oh,
that may be
absolutely.
the areas where there was the biggest undercount, and so perhaps our numbers are a little more accurate. But all right, storm of numbers, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but the next slide is really an interesting piece, which highlights the percentage, the change in the 17 years from the year 2000 to the year 2017. I highlighted Pleasantville in orange. So and maybe the most interesting piece of it is the percentage change. So in Pleasantville, from 2000 to 2010, our overall population dropped by 2.1%. From 2010 to 2017, it rebounded 3.6% up from the previous low. And so you take the overall 2000 to 2017, Pleasantville's population has grown by 1.4% in a 17-year period. But next slide, and again, all these obviously warrant a whole lot of interesting consideration. And some of this stuff is new that just came out literally the last couple of days in the Westchester County Affordable Housing Needs Assessment, which pulled together a lot of interesting demographic data. But here is the population change, again, Village of Pleasantville, not school district, so not entirely covering your area, of what happened by age group. So between 2000 and 2017, in the Village of Pleasantville, residents under the age of 19 dropped by 2.6%. Residents in the age group 20 to 29 grew by 52.9%, and residents 30 to 44 dropped by 31.9%. 65 to 74 up 16.3, and 75 to 84 dropped a little bit, and 85 and over up almost 30%. So that's an interesting piece of data, and especially since the ages 30 to 44 are, by demographer standards, typically in these parts, the age cohort where people's first home purchase might occur.
I guess 2029 is living with parents, right?
Yeah.
That's
20
what
to
happened.
20.
And it's all through the entire
Yeah.
county, though,
Well,
in all of them except for
look at that, 30 to
Portchester.
44
Right.
is red across the board except
Yeah.
Portchester.
Exactly,
Yeah,
Steve,
right.
I saw
Throughout
that.
the county.
Interesting, the whole
Throughout
county.
the county, really, it's very interesting to compare. So, and Shane and I, here I'm inviting him to leap from behind the camera. We're talking about the 30 to 44, which is kind of an interesting thing to
Lots of
see that
people are
kind of
having young
decline.
kids, and
Right, part of it may
it's
be
interesting.
people having kids older, whatever.
Yeah.
So the next one, and I'll stop boring you with this data, but it's really worth digging
Not
into.
at all, it's
The
interesting.
last slide, this is just the Village of Pleasantville, breaking this out in real numbers, as well as percentage change. So, you can see in the Village of Pleasantville that obviously the population is relatively small, and so the numbers are not that high, but between 2000 and 2017, that we lost 56 residents under the age of 20. We lost 575 residents in the age 30 to 44. We gained 20 to 29, we gained 45 to 64, we gained 65 to 74, lost 8 in the 75 to 84 category, and then gained 38 in the 85 category. And so one piece of that is kind of, I think, a reassuring thing in our collective goals to try to maintain an intergenerational community is that although it ain't cheap to live here, there are a whole lot of folks who have decided to stay.
Right.
Either that or they've had kids so much later that they still have kids when they're 85.
But also think about it,
And they're living at home.
like 34 to 44 age, over that 10-year period, jumped into that second
Right,
45 to
right.
64 group, right?
Right,
So,
yes.
So that's where some of
Yeah,
those...
they're moving through, yeah.
That's where some of those 575
Moved to.
became some of the 322, just by
Yeah.
virtue of getting older.
Right.
But at any rate, the overall takeaway point, and we'll all be digging in, there's a whole lot more data to be had, which I'll send your way as well. But clearly the world is working in a way a bit different from what we anticipated a generation ago in terms of where people choose to live, when they choose to move where they choose to live, and how their patterns develop throughout the various stages of life. But the last few slides, you can just bounce through them quickly, Noreen, are pieces that come out of the county planning
Sure.
piece about why the census is so important. And then the next one, she was at pains to point out that the citizenship question is now crossed out, doesn't exist on the new census. And then the next slide points out the steps that are being taken by the county. County Executive Latimer established a complete count committee, and there are 5 subcommittees. Field operations is the business of actually hiring folks boots on the ground to go find people who didn't respond. Marketing communications is just to get it out there, but we all fall into the next categories of nonprofits, faith-based, community-based organizations, youth education, senior programs, et cetera, as all vectors we can use to try to get the word out.
Right.
But I mean, the impact on county taxes, if there were truly 100,000 people undercounted, and if they could be captured, the impact on county taxes would be millions of dollars a year. I mean, it's really
To the good.
To the good. I mean,
Right.
we would all collectively help right what is a pretty shocking imbalance in the state of New York from the money we send to Washington versus get it back. If you look, as I know lots of you have, at the states that have the worst ratio of federal tax sent to Washington versus federal benefits received, and the states that have the best, it is a wide, shockingly wide range. And a state like New York is a big-time net payer, and we're ultimately subsidizing a lot of activities elsewhere in the country. So we certainly want to be fairly treated from the census standpoint. So then the last slide there is the Make Us Count Westchester logo.
Right.
I don't know how you all can use that, but to the extent that the vector you have into the families of 1,700 kids, anything we can all do to make sure people respond and to have that on the radar screen would be great. So,
Well, we think, as Angela said, we love the fact the
Yeah,
village,
thank
you're forward thinking about this. And I think it's outstanding, and we are on board. And even to the point of, it's an exercise in civics. It's
Absolutely.
very
Something that
important.
we should definitely talk about in our social studies classes and government classes. You know, because if the kids go home and say, "Hey, mom and dad,
Did we do the census
did we
yet?
do this? Did we fill in the census yet?"
Exactly.
You know, that could
Awareness,
prompt
get
more
the kids out. Right.
more people to get it done.
yeah.
Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Right.
I certainly had no idea the scale of the potential undercount based on Norma's comments,
Yeah.
and nor did I have any idea the scale of the
Money.
of the revenue that is lost per every
Right.
miscounted
Right.
person. So,
And you hear about New York is net losing taxpayers.
Oh,
You hear that all
right.
the time, right? But not apparently Westchester. right?
Westchester population has been growing.
Right.
So,
Yes.
obviously, I just came back from Albany a week ago, day-long session, and as you guys also know, the world is very different in different parts of the state.
Right.
But we all do the jobs we do for the places we live, and that's what we're here for. So
Right, okay. We're
anything
excited to join in the
more
effort.
on that subject? So, actually, it's kind of a good segue into the next item on our agenda, which was the village development update, because it feeds into exactly these kinds of numbers. The village board, obviously, there is a piece of the demographics, the population, the change in the number of people here, and the complexion of the age cohorts that is out of all of our controls. There are social forces and economic forces that we don't control, but there are some that we do. And when you look at what happened to the village of Pleasantville in those many years when the population was edging downward, we were at the same time seeing a commercial tax base edge downward, pushing tax responsibility increasingly to the residential side of the table. And so those things become problematic over a long period of time, and obviously it's the village and the town that developed the tax base that is used to tax everybody for what you do and for what we do. So folks have been concerned about some of the developments here, the Toll Brothers development, apartment buildings under construction and proposed, because it feels like an explosion of population, and certainly by Pleasantville standards these are big changes. So it's interesting to dig back, as we have over time, and now have some new data that came to us in the last few days about what's actually happening, recognizing again that 2017 numbers are a bit speculative out of the American Community Survey, not real counts. But at any rate, just a quick recap on the things that are going on in the village that have the potential to affect the population, as well as the potential to affect the tax base. A few of them we talked about before, but which are now well along. The Toll Brothers project on Washington Avenue, 68 townhomes, 61 are at market rate and will be taxed as such. 7 are affordable at the level of affordability based on the HUD guidelines to make those ownership homes affordable to a family at 80% of the average median income in Westchester, which I think this year in Westchester is a number in the 80s. Is that about right, Eric, do you think? Of course, living in these parts, you go to some places upstate, and a family income in the 80s would put you in a much different position from the standpoint of buying housing. But anyway, so that's the Toll Brothers project is almost completely built, and I think something like 2/3 of them are occupied now, and I think almost all of them are under contract, and so we're anticipating that in the coming 12 or so months they will end up fully occupied. They have been rolling onto the tax rolls successively, both on Toll Brothers' dime as they increase value of the property, and then on the individual homeowners' dime when they own them. As you may have recalled from our past discussions, there was a zoning change that allowed that project to happen, essentially pulling the Foxwood zoning over the top of the hill.
Down to Washington.
And contingent deal was that the homes be fee simple, not condominium. Condominium ownership produces a rather dramatic difference in the tax rate, and so a condominium owner, say of a home of $500,000, pays a dramatically lower tax than a single-family homeowner. So these are treated as single-family homes and are a really, really, really substantial contributor to both of our tax bases. We're in a circumstance now where a couple of these units have actually gone back on the market for resale. Whatever, individuals who life changes, or perhaps some of them bought in early with the intent that they would appreciate, but the market rate ones are selling in the 900s and some over $1 million. So that's a higher number, I think, than Toll envisioned when they got started, and it's a eye-popping number in many, many ways. But I think it's fair to say that it is an indication of a very desirable community in which we live, and you guys would know better than I, but I think that it had been the demographic studies done during the planning process suggested there might be 25, 26 kids, something like that. I think probably that number has not been realized thus far.
Not yet. I thought it was marketed for people with a different lifestyle. I was actually shocked by the people, because there were no backyards for swing sets, the amount of Bedford Road families that have chosen to live there. I find that interesting.
Right, the students we have are mostly from Bedford Road. where I
It's
think
fascinating.
the
It's
prediction
fascinating.
was that it would be older families
schoolers.
with high school age kids, but there are quite a few families.
When you say quite a few, do you have a sense for how many?
9?
Nine?
It was 9.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so-
it. I mean, for a younger age group, I was thinking, what, the stairs and the swing set and the but God bless, it's a good problem to have, and obviously.
Yeah, so
they
I mean, the
find
point,
it-
I know a couple of folks have said to me regarding this or any other project that they are convinced that the cost of servicing kids in the schools will far outweigh the tax revenue. So two things to say about that. One is I think that is demonstrably untrue based on what we've seen so far. I mean, you're going to end up with, I would assume, without multiplying too carefully, well over $1 million in new tax revenues, which doesn't mean you need $1 million more. It means it spreads out the load and
Spreads out the load. It's important for people to
relieves
remember.
everybody
It
else.
lowers everybody else's
Right,
obligation as opposed
And
to.
so if you've got 9, 10, whatever, even if it turned out as it at
You wanna
the
say
moment
something?
suggests perhaps it won't.
Did you want to say something,
Yeah.
Shane?
All right.
Okay.
I'm convinced that he will not resist the whole way, and I hope you don't. So at any rate, again, my takeaway, you obviously live this in terms of the school district, is that the revival of that moribund site is not only a net win to the village and the school district in terms of its tax revenue, that will moderate to some degree the costs all of us pay, but also it revives a property that wasn't going to be revived as what it was. And indeed, had it been revived as a pair of commercial buildings where there were several hundred surface parking spaces and there wasn't any economic viability to it, but if there had been, it would have been hundreds of people arriving to work at 9 and leaving at 5. So,
And I think people agree that these are people that have decided this is a community they want to live in. They've purchased a home here. They've put down roots here, and we welcome that.
they're coming for the same reasons I did, and most of us did. So,
Right.
Shane, you were at the mic and then you left.
Well, he had to turn the camera back.
You have to turn the
They did
camera
both
on,
at the
Mary,
same
but
time. Sorry, I'm sorry.
School board member
The
McGaffey.
remote.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So I just want to talk about the taxes issue because it is actually quite a complicated issue. So on the village side, for example, because unfortunately you get so little from the state and you're not getting state aid, when you add properties to the tax roll, you're going to definitely spread it out for the village taxpayer in terms of how much money is coming in from different houses. So if the village budget is $100 and you add 10 homes or 10 buildings, and the taxes stay at $100, everybody's going to be paying a little bit less. However, because the school district gets funds from the state and you have foundation aid, every year is a little bit different. And it's not always the case that by adding homes or businesses that taxes will necessarily go down. In fact, if we had Bill Gates move into town, our taxes would go up because taxes are based for school districts on a wealth ratio. It's a combination, it's the average of...
You mean the piece of your revenue that is
Comes
based
from-
on
that comes
foundation?
from the state.
Right.
And so we have to look at these numbers very
So
carefully and things very...
Say what the 3 things are.
Okay, so...
Population.
It's
student
population, student population, it's how much revenue we all make,
Income.
in our income, and property value. So if property value goes up and income goes up and student population stays the same, you get less money, depending on what's happening every year. I mean, so it's complex.
So we get a lower percentage on our
Right.
expense-driven aid.
Sure.
The
And-
aid that we get back on
And
things that
because
we-
houses aren't valued equally across the state, there's an equalization rate that makes it more complicated. And based on where that number is, things can go up or down. So if you look at the Pleasantville School District over the last couple of years, a couple of years ago, we suddenly got a lot richer, and the amount of aid we got in terms of expense-driven aid went down. So we got less for our
How
bonds, et
much did it go
cetera.
down?
How big of a percent is the
Hold on,
state
and, let me,
aid?
and then with the
Oh,
following
okay.
year, with nothing changing really, we got poorer and we got more money. And next year, we're getting richer again, so we'll get less.
Okay.
So it's not a straight, obvious, like it is for the village.
And it's a change of like 3 percentage points, give or take.
Right.
I'm just curious, how much of your overall budget is the state aid?
Okay, so probably have Tim come up.
I thought it was 16.
We have, in terms of foundation aid, we get about $3 million, right?
Significant money.
Of about the 50. Then you have expense-driven aid, which is another $3 million.
8 or 9 million altogether.
I don't know what your overall budget is,
50.
like percentage-wise.
50.
Okay,
it's about-
50, okay.
So if you think about this, the state
it was like
unfortunately uses a
18%,
word that we
16,
take
18%.
objection to. They basically look at that formula that Shane made. It's called the CWI, Combined Wealth Ratio, and it equals to the expected local contribution. Now, the way we say the expected local contribution, we say, well, that's really minimizing your obligation to fund us. And that's exactly what happens. So they take
And our local
it's-
contribution is pretty significant.
so
compared to
that's a
other
big chunk of money we
areas.
get, and you're basically saying because if people in the community tend to make more money according to their formula, and property is assessed at a higher value according to their formula, then the expected local contribution is higher,
higher,
and the
sure.
state will lower their
It's like financial aid at a
responsibility.
college.
But $1 million home
ridiculous.
here is not the same as $1 million home in Buffalo, right? You're getting a much different home in Buffalo, a much bigger, much, right?
I was gonna say $1 million, yes.
So, and this, a $100,000 salary here is not the same as a $100,000 salary in Buffalo. So it's really not comparing apples to apples. So we get
constantly
negatively.
fight them about
We get
this issue.
negatively affected by, so that's just a
And the
long
logic
way
is
of
that we
saying
don't
it's
need
not
it.
as clear cut of
Yes.
a win as it
Yes.
is for you guys,
Right.
because
Sure.
you just get more taxes based on the property. There are other factors involved in our revenues that may
We
be
have
And it
decreased
impacts your
as-
building aid,
Right.
and it impacts your, all kinds of aid, but it's at the foundation of the foundation aid formula. There's an expected local contribution. That's exactly in the
What it's
formula
called.
itself. And to me, every time they say that to me, I said, well, that's the way of you lowering your obligation to the citizens and residents of Pleasantville and the children of Pleasantville. So it's a big number that we get. The state actually still owes Pleasantville, what is it, Tim, over $2 million
$2.1 million
in foundation aid.
Every year. Every
that
year.
they-
Still owed.
that they have.
Imagine if we had
That's
2
the gap,
million
the
more in
so-called
our
gap,
budget.
right.
That's how big
And,
that gap is.
and is it imagined that that will ever be paid or not?
Not, well,
We
Andrew Cuomo
never
is
let them
governor because he
forget
doesn't
about
think.
their obligation, including every local elected official, so they're well versed in what that means.
But currently, the governor doesn't think that the foundation aid formula is meaningful anymore. He doesn't believe that what was determined as being fair by the, what was it, campaign for fiscal
The campaign
equity?
for fiscal efforts.
So there was a lawsuit 15 years ago now.
That's around 2000 or so, yeah. It goes back a while. And, you know, the foundation aid formula is coming under question, and there are hearings around the state examining the foundation aid formula. Any conversation about it is for the good, in my opinion. But
Well, the states, the Senate and the Assembly are looking at it. I'm not sure the governor has any appetite for making any changes to it. So, you know, they can look at it all they want, but it may not get passed
So in addition to all of that, there are columns A through J that they layer over it, and the federal obligation, let's say for students with disabilities, was 40%. The state, the feds to the state falls anywhere between 13 and 16, depending upon types of disabilities. To us locally, it's 9%. But they put an artificial ceiling and an artificial cap on the aid, so the wiggle room is very, very small. For English language learners as well, what we would consider kids who are on free and reduced lunch, that poverty ratio. And again, it does not reflect, we say categorically, that it does not reflect the increasing needs among our most vulnerable of students, our immigrant students, kids of trauma, our students with disabilities. It clearly doesn't. And it also is from a mathematical perspective, it is it's an average. So I basically say, instead of a median, if you win the lottery, please don't move to Pleasantville because we'll get no foundation aid. It'll just skew it completely the other direction. Or if you think about communities in the state, let's say if you're up in Sullivan County or in the Catskills where you have wealthy property along lakefront, yet 80% of the community is in poverty, they get so little foundation aid because of that handful of property. It gets skewed. It gets skewed. So our whole point, and thank you, Shane, for bringing it up, is that the layers of complexity as to how we can look at funding of our schools through whether or not growth, it's looked at something very differently through this formula from the state as opposed to common sense people would look at things.
So does it actually, I understand in theory what you're talking about. When you actually work through the numbers, do you actually lose money when you get I assume anybody coming in new to Pleasantville is going to be higher income than the average, right? Because the average includes a population that's been here for 50 plus years. So if you're getting earners coming in who are making between, say, $100,000 and $300,000, are what they pay for $1 million house, is that positive or negative?
Well, we've seen, it gets rather complex because then, of course, you add in all the equalization rates and you add in, the changes that take place in terms of the taxes.
Well, it varies year to year. It varies due to how much of our expenses are applicable to expense-driven aid, right? So that percentage may make a big difference. We may lose.
No, I get like this sensitivity.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Whether it offsets the loss, really, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying yes, you probably don't know, and it depends where every other community is that year and a lot of things, but it would probably be helpful if you had an idea whether you should be happy or unhappy in general.
Well, yeah, but you know what? And it's the same thing I'm pretty sure Eric understands too. First of all, there are certain numbers. It will call your health insurance increase, and it will be, as an organization that employs a lot of people, your retirement system contribution, which we have no control over. We have health costs that are out of our control, so we add the layer of unfunded mandates to all of this. So a lot of times it will depend upon, what does the governor intend to fund us back? What's the cost to educate some of our most vulnerable populations? Where do we see a blip in services that we need to provide? What are our health insurance increases? What is the contribution for the pension system?
There's a lot of factors.
So all of these come before I can answer that question
I
like
get
that.
it. I'm just saying, because if we want to coordinate in terms of, there's no concrete action we're going to take now, but if we're looking at another potential zoning change, let's say, and we want to understand, is this going to help or hurt the school district?
Right.
It's sort of helpful to know, on average, if the units that are going to go in here are going to attract these kind of people, and we sort of know from experience there'll be this number of special needs students, this number of whatever, then this is what it looks like financially. Then that could be a factor in our decision. But, we'd have to have some better sense.
So one of the benefits of being in the audience behind the camera is that I also have access to the internet looking things up, so I can answer some of these questions in real time. Okay, so, and there were decreases in the amount of building aid that we got, but the takeaway number for the 2017-18 school year, right, in terms of the, or 2018-19, was about a $300,000 decrease in
Net,
funding
net?
that the tax,
Net.
net.
Right.
From
Taking all those factors together and combining them all, you wanted to know what that was. And so if you look at taxes, every 360,000 currently is a percent. So it was about 330, so a little bit less than 1% in terms of what the net loss was due to the growth.
To the district.
And so if
The
we,
following year, however, we know that that's going the other way.
Right. Does it usually
I'm ju-
lag a year, Shane? Does it take
So
that
our
long?
growth,
Yes,
our
because-
growth
because
number
expense-
is 2 years old.
Got it.
Your growth number is a year old.
Is a year old.
So it's,
Yeah.
it's based, right, it's based on our growth factor, which gets calculated, gets added to, okay, so it's not really a 2% tax cap, right? The growth factor gets added.
Here we go.
To, it's such a complicated thing.
we are doing a great job of discouraging future candidates for either board.
There's a lot to understand because there's a lot of factors involved.
Right.
So in a year where I think the base was like it was like 0.2% in the 18-19 school year. So if we have a growth factor of 1%, that's a significant amount. We can raise taxes
Right.
for that.
For that
Right,
difference.
and it doesn't cost everybody 1%. Your tax rate doesn't go up that much,
Right.
but because it's spread over more people. But the other point I wanted to make is that our expense-driven aid is granted on the previous year's expenses. So we may do a budget thinking we're going to get a certain amount of aid on this number of expenses that we had, but if our rate changes, we won't get that much revenue back the following year. We'll get less. So
And we
that
get more
impacts our
money,
It's gonna be
and we get
offset
more
at
money in
least a year.
That
expense-driven
impacts our
aid than
budget
we
as
do in
well.
actual foundation aid.
Say that again?
So,
We
What-
get
So,
more
so-
money in expense-driven aid than we do in foundation aid.
Right. So a big concern we have, and I'm pretty sure you've all seen the headlines this week, and I'm sure it's part of the governor's approach towards things, that there was a big gap in funding of Medicaid, right?
$4 billion.
Exactly, huge amount of money. Now, the last time he made this kind of announcement before his budget, they cut aid to school districts. So we're sitting on pins and needles. If
That's when the gap elimination
that's when
adjustment
GEA came in, and that to close his budget gap, he took,
He took
money
money
away,
away
from
from schools.
districts, and it was a significant amount of money. So we are very, very concerned going into this cycle now of, is he going to? Peter's right, that it's a staggering amount of money. What will be the choices made?
So we probably should move into the further discussion about this, about development. But what I would say, and disagree with me if you see it differently, is that a project using the Toll Brothers as an example is obviously feeds into all of these complicated factors and affects our total assessment base. It affects our wealth ratio. All those things are affected, but the scale of the new revenues that share in the cost of operating the village and the school district, and the likely cost in services on our side, sanitation and the like, on recreation on your side, educating the number of kids, which appear to be tracking somewhat below the prediction in the planning process when that was explored, is still a net win for the community. In other words, if we don't generate interest in that kind of development, and those properties remain as that was, as essentially a moribund site, we will all end up finding it harder to pay the taxes that we have to pay, which is short of saying there's certainty on any of this, but it's a pretty good bet.
Right.
We're all engaged in trying to study a very complicated organism, right? And I mean, when I look at this, I come from a family of folks who built things. And I think that people building things and revitalizing communities and seeing growth and change, all of that is for the good. And I believe that. There may be times when, in a given instance, it's not for the good. I acknowledge that the complexity of this is such that there could be times when that does not pan
And we
out.
don't get to decide what
Right,
people
right.
think they
That's
want to
right.
do.
You know, we're all but human. We do the best we can do. You know, but I think that the best we can do is study and communicate and hope to affect change in such a way that that money is fairly distributed throughout the state. I understand, you know, when we talk about places like Buffalo, you know, there are different levels of need and all the rest of that. But it has been for a long time very true that this region has not gotten the share of foundation aid that other regions have. And putting formulas aside, the reason for that is because we have been a more stable place in terms of voter behavior than, say, places where there are places, you know, where seats flip, such as Long Island. And so when you look at it, you know, for a number of years, Long Island as a region drew more state aid because people needed to get those, the folks occupying those seats in the Senate and Assembly needed to show that they were delivering the goods.
And they did.
To keep their seats.
Right, right.
Long Island's
And,
good.
you know, so Westchester gets placed in with the rest of the Hudson Valley. And if you just drive north for a little while, this is a very different place than, say, Rhinebeck. Right? Than, say, Poughkeepsie.
Right.
Right?
No doubt.
And so that's, you know, so that's part of the dilemma we all face here.
Right. And I certainly think, though, that going to add to that, the structure of the Toll Brother property where it's fee simple, that's, you know, that's important. I mean, I know a lot of my colleagues, other superintendents, other board presidents struggle in communities where they have IDAs who've created pilots and although the intent of all of that back in the day was something very different, what looks like now, but you will have, you know, as we all know, you get a pilot agreement. Part of your business strategy is to hold on maybe you get the agreement for 10 years. At years 6 and 7, you file for tax cert, you want to sell it. So it is added layers of complexity of some of these other developments we have seen throughout Westchester County. So I think it's important for us to keep an eye on that. Who's the developer? What's their business plan? You know, and right now the current appetite for pilots from my colleagues in school districts is that no, you get more kids, no tax breaks, and the financial to the school district is hard.
In Long Island, they want veto power.
We see it, they want veto power. I can tell you there are at least 5 in Westchester County where that's the case, and it's a problem.
Because they see no upside.
Pilots for folks
And increased population.
who may not know
Because right
pilots
now,
is
school districts don't have a voice in that whole debate.
Payments in lieu of
payments in
taxes.
lieu of taxes. None
sorry.
none
Yes,
of the
payment.
projects under discussion in the Village
Which
of
is
Pleasantville
great. That's my point.
have
of the
any
fee
pilot
simple
agreements
point, too.
of any kind.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to address your question directly, because you
Okay.
asked a direct question. I believe it deserves a direct answer.
I appreciate that.
I don't think you'll love my direct answer, but I'm just going
But you're
to
gonna
say it
get it.
anyway.
I reserve time for a rebuttal.
Absolutely,
Let's get back
absolutely.
to
This
the
is an important
camera.
topic,
Move the
though.
camera.
This is an important topic because I believe that, you know, the village board has acted very responsibly and is
Yes.
trying to increase
Yeah.
the tax base because they recognize that, you know, most of the tax burden is borne by homeowners, and they're trying to, you know, diversify that burden. And I think that's admirable. I think the problem is that the New York State formula when it comes to school districts does not work that way and actually rewards moribund communities. And the more you atrophy in the state of New York as a community, the more money you get. And I think it's our jobs, and I know, Mr. Mayor, that you serve on municipal committees and such. I think it's important that you continue to send home that message that, you know, we're trying to do the right thing here and we shouldn't be penalized for it.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do as well.
I don't think you're delivering a message I don't want to hear. I agree with you. Other than to say, all of that is true, but the answer to that from a policy standpoint, and certainly from the standpoint of the residents and the school district, the Village of Pleasantville, is having a moribund community isn't what we're trying to do, even if it would get us more state aid. So,
I understand,
Yeah,
but getting more
yeah.
state aid means our
Right.
taxes are lower. I mean, so if we're trying to
yeah, but I
lower
mean,
the
that's
burden of
it,
taxes.
right. I get it, but it's not an argument that you're really making. That right.
No, but what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say is, even though we're doing the right thing, there are times when
Right.
it might be, in certain years, raising taxes.
No doubt. Yeah,
And-
although
and we want
I
to change that because doing the right thing should actually lower taxes.
I have as yet seen no evidence that in any year the new tax ratables have done anything other than mitigate tax increases. And if you see it differently, you can get me the
I
data.
just told you that in 1819 there was
You're going
a
to
net
owe a
300,000.
debt of gratitude to board member Conti, who has taken over the role.
He's gonna turn the light on in a minute. You're
But
gonna-
in 1819 there was a net decrease in terms of funding that we
Net
got.
loss.
Yeah, so we had a loss. So at least on the school district
A
side,
loss in state aid that
that had to be made up for
Made up
in
by the
that-
local
tax
taxpayers.
revenue.
But you would not have been better off if you did not have new ratables in that year.
Because if you're getting $1 million roughly from Toll Brothers, isn't that still a $700?
I mean, you haven't gotten that yet, it isn't fully
Oh, we're not
realized,
getting that.
but, right, you will get that and more.
No,
So,
but the net was,
I said net.
yeah,
Fair.
I understand.
the net was
Net.
after we
Whatever.
factored in what
Yeah.
we
All right,
got.
we're going to be here all night at this
Okay.
rate because we're such a
After we
lively
factored in
and
what
amusing
we-
bunch.
But maybe we should have you into the district office and you can,
All right.
Welcome to the
you can be
complexities
educated.
of foundation
Yes,
aid.
I get it, and I sympathize with it, and I am in lockstep with you, as is
It's just hard for
Municipal
us to
Officials
agree
Association.
flat out, as a blanket statement that it's beneficial, because it's not always beneficial for us. That's the
So-
point Shane's
and I just
trying
wanted to make that point.
Sometimes it's
I-
not.
I am convinced, and as yet have never seen any evidence that the development we've seen over the last 5 years has been anything but beneficial for the taxpayer, including the school district taxpayer. So if that's not the case, someone will show me, I don't believe it. So I'd happy to stand corrected if there's data to suggest it, but
and
I
you'll get
think-
up on the roof and shout it up from the rafters.
I will, yes, I will.
Is that a promise?
I'll wear the T-shirts, this is,
Thank you. I look
Do you
forward to
zoom
that.
in, Lou?
all right. Where were we? We're only on item B here.
Yeah.
Tom,
Wait, and
Tom,
you've only talked
Yes.
about Toll Brothers.
Yes.
So there's
Welcome, Tom.
multiple other
Yes.
developments for you to fill us in on.
Yeah.
Yes, Tom Rooney, 26 Hillview Drive. I'm glad Shane kind of broke you in. I really understand the school board's plight with money, state aid, other aid coming in. Being an educator for the last 35 years, I know how school systems work. But I also know that being a resident in this town for almost 70 years, I know how my pocketbook works. And the taxes that we pay, as was mentioned, are quite high. The new, that's used the Toll Brothers project, because you brought that up, it's bringing in a high amount of revenue to the village. But in my opinion, I don't see, well, it's not an opinion, I don't see any taxes going down because of that. So I hope that the added revenue that Toll Brothers and other new proposed or on-site building now is not going to be used for other things other than lowering, running the town, the village budget, and there are other communities that actually get rebates on their taxes. To my knowledge, Pleasantville has never ever seen one of those. So one of the concerns that I have is, I'm glad to hear that there's only 20 plus new children in that Toll Brothers project.
I think the number was 9,
9.
No, well,
right?
whatever
The
the
estimate
number
was
is.
25. I
The
think we've-
estimate,
We've
that's right.
seen 9 so far.
Okay. Between the Toll Brothers, projects that are in process right now, and proposed building apartments, there's going to be somewhere in an excess of 200 new apartments in this village. Now, I don't know what your demographics are with children moving into 200 plus new apartments, but I can't see how that will not affect the Pleasantville School District. The the last thing residents will want to hear is that there's no room and we have to build again onto the school building. To my knowledge, in all the years that I lived in this town, I don't believe a Pleasantville school board budget has ever been defeated, because we all really truly believe the power of education in this village. But there is a limit to what one can pay and what is going on in the village. Now, I know, Mr. Mayor, that you told me many times it's not you that can tell somebody what they can or cannot build on a plot of land. To some degree, I'm sure you're correct. But changing zoning laws and codes so things could be built is within your realm of legalness. And use the Toll Brothers. Toll Brothers couldn't be built there unless you changed the zoning.
We did.
Oh, correct. All right. The project next to the post office that I think they're past China by now. I don't know when they're going to stop. But you can hear that a mile away at my house. That being said, zoning had to be changed there too, so it'll go up another story. Okay? And then the newer proposed projects for the old LaDuca project on Vanderbilt Avenue, it's going to be more apartments. I know nothing is firmed up, but you pretty much assured me that's what it's going to be. That being said,
No zoning change there.
Exactly.
well, zoning change or no zoning change, it's going to be more apartments.
Yes.
I mean,
if approved, yes.
if approved,
Yes.
that's the statement that I'm making. I've been accused of being against development. I'm not against development, but I don't understand why everything that's developed in this village has to be another apartment building. Apartment buildings that don't even reflect the architecture of this village. They don't belong architecturally in this village, what's being built. The Washington Avenue project, the old try and buy, that does not fit in with any architectural plans of this town. And then the proposed or to be built following the rest of Washington Avenue down to the corner, that's going to be, I assume, a carbon copy of the building that's there now. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Oh, well, okay, well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. If it does, it wouldn't surprise me. But you look at the building, the apartment that they built on the old Marr Funeral Home property. Bigger than it should be, however, it's a very pleasing looking building, and it sort of fits in with the structure of the buildings along Washington Avenue. Why couldn't some structure like that be built? I questioned the board before. Does this village have an architectural review board?
We do.
And the answer is we do. And my question then was, I think they need to go to school and see what an architectural review board will do.
I don't want to derail your thoughts that have to do with this joint meeting. If you have concerns about the ARB, A, I know what they are, but B, you're welcome to go to an ARB meeting, which are public, and voice them.
No.
So, but let me just touch on the pieces
Was the zoning change along Washington Ave there to allow that
No.
building to be
No.
taller?
By trying by-
That was always allowed to be as tall as it is?
So, look,
Okay.
Tom, let me just say, and folks will disagree, as well they should, depending on the perspective they have, but I think it is very, very hard to argue that allowing the former Baker property site, which is the site of the now Toll Brothers project, to remain moribund was not in the interest of the Pleasantville taxpayer or in the interest of the community and its economy. So you suggest that you would rather see that developed as something other than residential. And what were the options? There were two existing office buildings there that needed a significant infusion of cash. The owner went through a serious and not inexpensive venture to assess what was required for the buildings to make them saleable or rentable, and came back with, I think, what was pretty solid evidence that it wasn't happening. Not a logical place to invest money in an office building, a kind of a funny location, not easy on, easy off to anywhere, whatever. Not going to happen as an office building. So the alternatives, and I can tell you this as a fact, is that there were a number of uses that were considered and proposed to the then owner including a not-for-profit private school use, which would have taken the property entirely off the tax rolls and generated a significant rush hour amount of traffic. There was some preliminary consideration of healthcare uses. All of those things have obviously a different set of dynamics in terms of what taxes they generate, how much traffic they generate, but given the reality that we don't get to decide what people want to do with their property other than what the law allows, I think that the result we achieved there, which is not only a very positive contribution to the tax base, but resolved a whole bunch of problems that the folks on the low side of Washington Avenue suffered, is an absolute, hands-down net win for the community. Does that mean there aren't compromises? Of course not. Everything comes with a downside. If we could have maintained the section of that property that was forested as a forested area, I would love that. We don't own it, and we're not in a position to buy it. It would have cost folks like you and me more money. I'm not sitting here on millions of dollars. I pay the same taxes you do. I'd like to see them lower. When we see new tax ratables, and the school district sees new tax ratables, for the most part, those ratables mitigate increases as opposed to produce the rebate you propose, not because we're crazy spenders, not because we say, hey, this is our chance to do something gold-plated, but because we are struggling line by line annually. I know they do, and we do too, to try to grapple with the very facts that we have employees who work hard, and you know that. You've complimented them to me, and we're paying them the wages that are prevailing in this region based on their union contracts, and we're paying into their retirement, just as the school district is, to make sure that folks like you, who have contributed so much time and energy and spirit and quality to the educational program, can live in a place like Pleasantville through your retirement, and I hope you stay here forever. So, sorry to get on a soapbox, but you're not talking about a bunch of people who are saying, hey, let's develop and find ways to spend money with disinterest in the taxpayer. To the contrary, oh my God, I stay up late at night trying to think of ways to make this a more affordable place to live. I can tell you, you'd be mighty interested to see it on the Planning Commission, County Planning Commission site. Some of the demographics I reported tonight include a section that identifies the fact that the gap, the income gap, for affordable housing in Pleasantville is among the highest of all villages. And why is that? That's because we've become a desirable place to be. We're on a roll that I'm extraordinarily proud of, but which comes with a downside. Folks' houses are worth more money. All of us feel good about that. If you own a piece of the rock, you now have a more valuable piece of the rock, and there are folks lining up to buy it. Does that make a great, long-standing intergenerational community? It's hard to do. So I am in your living room whenever you want to talk about it, but something like Toll Brothers was a net win, and to present it as otherwise, I think is not fair.
But that's not exactly what I said.
Okay.
What I said was, why do we have to have every new construction project in town be apartments rather than something else?
Okay.
Toll Brothers is Toll
Okay.
Brothers, and added to the town revenue, which is great.
So let me touch on, for example, the Washington Avenue project on the site of the old Try and Buy. That is commercial space on the first floor. Chase Manhattan Bank is I guess it's no longer called Chase Manhattan. Chase Bank is building a big new branch that opens, I think, December 9th. The liquor store is moving to the left storefront, and the middle one is, I think, has yet to be rented. Upstairs there are 23 apartments, including 3 affordable. And I just talked to the developer the other day. They have something like 80 people wanting to rent those apartments. And their report was they're not aware of any significant number of kids. Not that that couldn't happen, but that's where we are. So the reason that's a project with commercial on the first floor is we require it in the A1 district. That's true for the project next to the post office as well. And that the reason it's residential above the first floor and not office is that's where the market is, and that's where folks want to invest. I can tell you, because I know, because I've talked to a bunch of them, developers that have kicked the tires of some projects that were primarily office and felt that they couldn't get the footprint and couldn't get the economics that would make it work. So just right now, at this moment, 10 years ago, or certainly 15 years ago, everybody who knocked on the door was talking about co-ops and condos in a downtown setting. Now they're all talking about rental, and every one of these projects that are under discussion now is rental. You see that going on all over the county, all over the region, perhaps in metro areas all around. But I can tell you the piece of it that is I think, good news is that Pleasantville is viewed as an attractive place to live. And, you saw the demographics tonight. I don't know how this will change the demographics, but I can tell you that we're likely to end up at the end of this, as you rightly report, with new apartments and therefore a higher population. That higher population is not any kind of a stratospheric increase, 4%, something like that. So, God, we're at the levers of some stuff, but there's a whole lot of stuff that depends on what people want to do with their own personal property in a free country. So what I'm happy to say is most of the people who come to the village of Pleasantville and end up going through the process of approvals are proposing projects that feel like projects that are being generated by people who have come here for good and honorable reasons. All
right, and then just one other, I'll make this quick. It's in the same ballpark, a different train. In the Memorial Plaza, the civic space proposal,
yes.
Not proposal, but the plan
Yeah.
that.
So I'm happy to hear this. I just don't want to take time away from this joint meeting too much. So. Okay.
I think it's all related. The only thing I wanted to go on record saying today is that if you recall, going back many months ago, prior to this, I suggested that possibly a survey should be taken of the village residents to see if they think it's a good idea to spend $4+ million on a memorial beautification project, civic space. And I was told, no, it's not going to happen. But I am glad to see that a fellow resident did produce his own survey, a very fair survey, and the people that were surveyed in here were village residents. If it was brought out to a little further, you would get even more of a result of the survey. But I just want to go down to say that memorial project, according to the people of this on-bias survey, 52.5% of those people are not in favor of spending our taxpayers' money on something that we don't need. And I just wanted to say that again, even reading further that the proposed money for that project is already, you'll probably correct me on the number, is already $1 million over budget to begin with. And it hasn't even begun. So I just wanted to make it clear that there are a lot of people in this town that are opposed to that project. So I just wanted to go on record saying that I and 52.5 others.
52.5% of the people who responded.
Correct.
So look, as I've said before and I've said publicly, I'm glad to have that information. Actually, one of the most useful pieces of the survey that was sent out and was just a voluntary survey, it's not a scientific sample, was the comments that came back, which have not been published, but which Jonathan Cunningham, who organized the survey, has given back to us. Really interesting stuff. Yep. And some of it's stuff we've already heard in the context of the public meetings. Under no circumstances do any of us think nobody is in opposition to this. Certainly plenty of people are, and we heard from them. One aspect of the survey that I think is useful evidence but needs to be taken into context is folks like you distributed and said, please, this is a horrible project. Please take out this survey and say how awful it is. So that's your right, absolutely. And no doubt people did the same thing and said, this is a wonderful project. Please fill out the survey and say it's great. So, that is all useful stuff to hear, but nobody's talking about spending $4 million. If it turns out to be $4 million, we won't do it. What we have said clearly, and I will say again to you right now, is we're experiencing, as you perhaps have heard if you paid attention to the last few meetings, a crazy inflation in public works projects, where projects all over the region are coming back dramatically higher than anybody reasonably expected them to be, and where they would have been even a year or certainly 2 years ago. So that's worrisome, and nobody's trying to drive a bus into a brick wall here. If it's too much money, we won't do it. So the first piece of it is the Manville Road project and the closing of the slip lane. That is capturing a $1.5 million state grant. It is conceivable that we will simply say we're going to forego the money and do nothing if the rest of it costs too much money. So you're talking about a bunch of people here, including the 5 of us and the administration, who are proceeding carefully and cautiously. Is that different from saying we don't think it's a good idea? No. I happen to think the project is a very good idea and underlain by 10 years of very serious work. But we're not going to drive this project into a crazy cost overrun. If we can't afford it, we won't do it.
Well, considering that the slip lane changes were prompted by traffic studies and different things and qualify for this
Yes.
this grant from the state, would you consider doing that piece of it and just minimizing the effect on the rest
Well,
of
that is
Memorial
the way it's
Plaza?
structured at the moment.
That's the way, it's two separate projects.
The idea is that the $1.5 million and the closing of the slip lane and the ADA changes the corners, the straightening out of the wacky crosswalks, and don't want to get into it, the taking away of the traffic light that's at Wheeler and Manville, so there'll be only
The
one left,
gotcha light,
although
as
it's
my son
out
calls
tonight.
Or at least it was for me.
Right, yeah,
Of course.
there was a power outage.
My
yeah.
point in asking is because I think that people have less concern over the
Yeah, no, I
usefulness
get it.
of that project as opposed to
Right.
the beautification piece,
So-
if
so-
you want to
so-
call
so-
it that.
so-
So,
Right,
Yeah.
no doubt. And so, part of the question of that is, can we afford even to do that piece, even with $1.5 million in state grant? Then when we see what those numbers turn out to be, I mean, we have stripped down the project and taken out some of the things we really hope to have in order to come back with what we hope will be an affordable number. Got rid of the granite curbs and went to concrete. Got rid of replacement of all of the sidewalks in the 2-block zone so that they would be all new and matching, and said, okay, we're only going to replace sidewalks in the circumstance where they're either not ADA compliant or required to create the ADA compliance at the corners. So in essence, I think what we propose is to go out to bid in the next few months with a project that delivers the pedestrian benefits that were
Was the
underlying
goal.
the
That won
concept
the
of the
grant.
project.
That was the goal
that
of
won
the
gra-
original project.
That won the grant, and see what numbers we get back. If we get back an affordable number and can proceed with that, that will very significantly affect what we can do in the perceived next construction season, although who knows how this all works out. A state DOT process is not a quick one.
we
We'll
know
see where it
about building
plays out.
projects.
Yeah.
We know about getting
Yeah.
building projects through the state.
So,
We feel your pain there.
I do not sit here to say, as I might have a year ago, that I had reasonable confidence that the fiscal implications of this were as we had originally presented them. I think the landscape has changed. Perhaps you're seeing the same thing on your side. I mean, I can tell you that, there's been some anecdotal discussion with contractors saying, I'm busy, I don't need the work, I'll put in a crazy
Put in a
number.
crazy
And
number,
honestly,
and if
I
I
put
get
in a
it,
crazy number and I get the job.
We're
So,
currently in the design phase of the bond that was passed
Yeah.
this past May. So, and there were certain estimates that were done by our architects, in terms of
Cost
us,
escalation.
yeah, in terms of us, what we're hoping to be able to do with this bond. We may not be able to do as much as we thought
Right.
if we
I mean-
if we encounter the same
Yeah.
cost escalations that you're
And
experiencing.
we haven't
So
seen
we'll
them
have to
yet,
see.
but DOT says they're seeing this with their own projects, they're seeing it in the whole Hudson
area.
Valley region. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of good and bad news. None of us are out here hoping for a construction recession.
I want to make sure that's clarified.
Yeah.
That's, you said it's, $1 million over budget and all that. I don't know where you're getting that particular number. What the mayor is describing
It was in
is,
the newspaper.
okay, all of this is still in flux. And so us as stewards of that taxpayer that you just described, we're obviously not going to go through with something that's gone crazy. So I don't want the public record to show that something is already underway and is already a cost overrun, like, an aircraft carrier that's already in the dry dock and it's $1 million over budget. That hasn't even started yet. Okay? I want to make sure you understand that.
The dry dock is being built.
Well, actually,
Where?
nothing's
So-
being built yet.
Where is it?
That's a figure of speech that it's being built. I mean, you have the project earmarked to. I mean,
We've authorized a bond.
Yeah.
That's
right,
it.
Right.
It's
the
very
the only
much-
other point, I don't want to waste anybody's time, but I do suggest you do check with the DOT as far as the construction of the roads, particularly like in front of the diner with the new whatever pattern they're going to make there, and the radius of those turns. What I have looked at from the countless charts that you put up there, it is very likely that larger trucks, and particularly our fire engines and a tower ladder, will not be able to
Tom,
make that turn.
Tom,
It all has to
Tom,
be checked out.
Tom.
That being said, I think...
No, I have to.
Hold on.
I got to respond
We
to
get
that.
to answer.
Go ahead.
Tom,
Yes.
we had the Pleasantville Volunteer Fire Department bring out their biggest truck, the hook and ladder truck, and we had the police stop traffic, and we had the civil engineers out there measuring,
With lasers.
making all the turns in the existing condition, which will be widened in the new proposed condition if it happens. But secondly, there's a dip there that has historically been a problem over many years that's already existed at that corner for the fire department, and we want to make it
We're
better.
going to fix it.
You're
So,
not taking
to-
the dip out, are you?
What?
That's fun.
Yeah, you like that?
Okay, so I just, you throw this stuff out and the casual observer says, God, these people
my
have
God,
paid
they're
attention
not
to
even
nothing.
thinking of the fire trucks.
I mean, do you want us to buy the engineering review of a fifth company?
No, of course.
Okay.
not.
I mean, we
So-
obviously, that all gets
Look.
looked at very carefully. No
That's
one
true.
builds a thing that the fire truck can't get around.
Well, just all that being said is that I just hope that you are considering everything that has been said. And
We are.
the expenditure of the monies that could be used for better things like fixing the Pleasantville pool. That being said, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tom.
And I thank you, and I offer, as I have in the past, you tell me whose living room to show up, I'm happy to stay as long as you want. I might tire you out.
All right, I just want to add just one little clarifying point. We did have a budget go down in 2007.
Yeah, I thought there had been one.
All right.
And for the past, since that, we've kept it under, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know, Tim, correct me, if it's going to end, and it would be a great point of advocacy, but taxpayers get rebates if the school district stays. I don't know if it's same with the village. I don't, it's got so complicated.
It's changed over the years.
Changed over the years, but right now.
As long as we stayed
as-
under our
Yeah, I
tax
think it's
cap.
right
As
now,
long
school
as
districts.
school districts stay underneath the tax cap, it's a little bit of an extra burden, incentive, whatever you want to call it. But
there any
a rebate
incentives?
is given to taxpayers if
Right.
the school district does that. So-
Just the school district, not the county, not the
Right.
Not
town,
the
not
county,
the
not the
village,
town,
just
the
the school district.
Does
right.
that roll out in the next year or two? I think they changed it, right?
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing, that it might end, so it becomes another point of advocacy for people to continue to ask the governor to support that.
In the budget, it's in its last year. We'll see what happens
Let's see
going
what
forward.
happens.
Yeah.
Right, right.
All right.
But I
So-
don't want people to blame us when it ends,
Right.
because
Where's my
it's more
rebate?
of the same. Where's my
Yeah.
rebate? Call the governor.
Right.
So, we ought to give his phone number. Just quickly to finish the development thing, we already touched on the Try and Buy site, which is, they're starting to lease up now and anticipate the next couple of months, I think it will be fully occupied. And as reported, parking below and behind, accommodating all the parking on that site. 70 Memorial Project, the one Tom referred to, which is a project next to the post office. The excavation is nearly complete. Yes, it's been noisy. Thank God it's nearly done. I will say a shout out to the contractor who's doing it. Ugly, difficult, noisy, hard work, but by multiple reports being done in a very responsible way, given the fact that it's hard to do it in a manner that doesn't disrupt the lives of a bunch of people. So at any rate, 70 Memorial is, I think the last count was 79 apartments, 150 parking spaces. All the in and out from the parking is on the Cooley Street side, which will be pushed through as a two-way street at the developer's expense, so that the street in front of Mediterraneo will be two-way.
It'll be two-way.
It's going to become a two-way street. If you come back out to Bedford, you'll still only have a right turn only
Okay.
as you
So
do
you still
now.
can't make a left onto
You can't make a
Bedford.
left onto Bedford in front of the Art of Wine there, but
Right.
it'll be two-way traffic, and all the traffic in and out of the apartment development is off Cooley Street, and the two significant public benefits arise, three significant public benefits. One is Cooley Street becomes a two-way street. I think that's going to be a significant improvement in the general circulation logistics.
Sure.
And among other things is going to give people an opportunity to avoid Memorial Plaza if they're trying to get between Manville and Bedford,
Sure.
and also to avoid the loop all the way around Pleasantville Ford if you're just really trying to get back. So hopefully that turns out to be a positive
And
thing.
Peter, what's the breakdown of types of units in that?
I don't know exactly. I think there are 4 3-bedroom, 40, roughly speaking, half 2-bedroom and half 1 in studio.
So
something
was
like
the
that.
3-bedroom, the zoning change?
There are
Pete?
4 3-bedrooms.
4 3
They sought a variance for that from the zoning board, and it was achieved, if I got that right, Eric?
Yes.
Curious as to why, but that would be from our perspective, a little bit of a
more
heads
what-
up,
yeah.
antenna up.
Yeah. So that project has planning commission approval. It doesn't have a final building permit yet. It's coming down the pike. The 2 other significant benefits are the village is going to end up with, I believe, 25 spaces for permit use in that parking garage. And the developer is also creating what I think will be quite beautiful walkway that goes on his property from Memorial Plaza down to Cooley Street with a public easement. We traded a couple of small triangular parcels to straighten it out. So there will be a very nice landscaped walkway that will bring you from Memorial Plaza down to Cooley and to the key food area, unlike
Those
the condition that
25
existed for many years.
Permit spaces, are those permanent? Are they for a certain amount of time?
So that
Or
negotiation
that
is still
negotiation
ongoing.
to be
Certainly,
determined?
certainly 15 of them are permanent.
Okay.
The other 10 may have some sort of a time frame on them, after which the revenue from them might devolve to the developer. That's a negotiation that is
Oh, but they
soon to
might
be.
stay permit, but
Yeah, I mean, I think that negotiation has not
village
been
wouldn't get
finalized,
the-
but, you know,
Right.
we've had a.
I'm asking
spots
in
would
terms
still be
of,
available.
I'm asking in terms of like how many more
Parking
commuter
spaces.
parking spots.
Yeah,
this
so
would-
we've
and-
had-
And if that would be a permanent thing.
We've had a good cooperative discussion and continue to have it, but there will
Okay.
be a bunch that are permanent for sure. At any rate, that's probably a, 2-year construction? If I got that right, Eric? And commercial on the first floor facing Memorial Plaza. Again, a big project by Pleasantville standards, but one that I think is well thought out. As Tom pointed out, we, after a lengthy process, updated the master plan for the Central Business District. In fact, won a planning award for it, and changed the zoning to allow 4 stories in that one block, the one bounded by Cooley Street, Memorial Plaza, Bedford, and Manville. And part of that was driven by the reality that the building on the rock, as we came to call it, was never going to be anything other than what it was, unless we allowed somebody to build something with no parking attached to it. Somebody had to have enough economic benefit to take down the building and take down the rock, which you see is going on now. So then the last thing to report, and then the rest of the things that are going around, I think are kind of small market things, is the proposal that Tom also referred to on the Duca Auto site. That's before planning right now. 52 Depew Street, a company called Lighthouse Living has proposed a 3-story mixed-use building consisting of 73 apartments, street-level retail service, and a parking garage with 109 parking spaces. That, it's public knowledge, was a developer who came forward to all of us.
All of us.
Sought a pilot, and we declined. So that's in the planning process right now, and we'll see what is the result. No zoning change there. That's a site that has always been in our A1 district, and I think mostly, no doubt, an accident of history from way, way back, because it's always been a commercial site, auto use. I dare say that at the time of the crafting of the zoning, when that zoning was created, nobody envisioned that somebody would want to build
an
a
apartment
residential
building there.
building right on the edge of the sawmill, but the world is the way it is. So
Well, look what they're doing in Chappaqua.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
putting that apartment building right at the exit ramp.
Well, that came out of the affordable housing
Yes.
project,
Right,
so
but
that's
still,
kind of a
it's,
different
it's
dynamic.
The piece of
sliver.
I mean, part of the reason that is going on there was the county subsidy to make it possible to do it. In this case, it's a private project, although I will say there is, in essence, a public subsidy attached to it at the end because it has been identified as a contaminated site. It's on the state brownfields list, and so part of the requirement for anybody who does anything is to remediate the site, which obviously is a good thing. But in the end, there are brownfield benefits that come back to the developer for having done that. So it is, under any circumstances, regardless of what is approved there and what had been proposed, a difficult site, both as a physical matter and now because it is a certified contaminated site. School district trends, I'll stop talking. Thank God.
School district enrollment trends. That's you, right?
Yes.
Nothing to say.
No, I should just, first of all, I have to just point out the fact that as a former history teacher, and I used to teach computer science after that with another degree, a democracy is messy, but I love the discourse. I love the conversation. I love the fact it's always about thinking about what is it I need to know, but don't know I need to know it. That's a question I ask myself every day, and I think the spirit of conversation we had this evening really does reflect that, and that's very important. No one here, I think we're all comfortable enough in our own skins to be able to ask the questions we need to ask, because if they are our questions, they are important areas we need to unpeel, discover, and look at, and it just helps build different perspectives at the end of the day. And heavy lifting is always about asking those right questions. Yep. And at the end of you'll find a different path. And I just love the conversation and being able to have I see our chief of police here, and being able to talk with everybody on a real-time basis and an honest basis is actually wonderful. So it's a great statement to this village and community.
And a conversation that goes on in settings other than this as well, and I very much appreciate it, and obviously appreciate even when we have disagreements, folks like Tom who show up and are counted. So.
It's all good. So we are very fortunate in Pleasantville to have stability in enrollment. We have families that have chosen to move into town. They love the village. They love our schools. I gave a tour again to another family today who's marketing, looking for what they had done their homework and they knew exactly what they wanted. And that's a really great thing. That's a really great thing. It makes me proud. I'm proud of this village, and it really does take a community to raise a child. That's not the case in all communities around us.
Yeah, some of our neighboring school districts have experienced either grade increases
Great
or
increases.
decreases.
And I was thinking about the Census project, those communities that are experiencing great increases in enrollment. It's not reflected in the census, so it's critical that we help everyone to make sure that those numbers get reflected for this county. Critical, so important.
Yeah, so we've had some recent classes that have been a little smaller than they had been in the past, but we're edging back up again. So
Past 3 years, we're back up to 6 sections.
It's maybe we've hovered around 1,800 students for the past 5 years? Is that?
Yeah, I mean,
5, 6 years,
it's
maybe
interesting
100 less,
watching the enrollment
100
trends
more.
because it's, I look at my 30 years here. When I first started here, I mean, Peter, you remember, we had almost a little over 900 students.
Yeah.
And you think about that, then there wasn't a middle school. There was just the Bedford Road School. And the middle school was called the North Campus, and it housed grades 7 and 8 as the North Campus. And there was just a high school. And the administration of that middle school was split between the principal of the Bedford Road School, Mrs. Glotzer, and we all call Mrs. Glotzer, and then Dr. A, who was the principal of the high school at the time. So we saw a tremendous growth. But like every place else, right after, in 2008, there was a dip in population because it was the Great Recession, and we then have stabilized to about 1,700. Every once in a while, you might go up a little bit smaller.
So interestingly, that growth, 20 years ago, was pretty much entirely in the existing housing stock. Nothing new happened, right?
Right. Yeah.
was just a change in
The rollover.
in the rollover of housing.
Younger families with kids
Right, right.
moving in.
More
and-
children,
Right.
maybe?
And it warmed my heart to find out, and I think I shared this with you at Incoming K this year. I have 5 of my former students who have moved
Really?
back into town, and they are parents now. And then I bumped into a couple who were heading into the auditorium for the celebration yesterday. And again, thank you. Thanks to the village for all their support and help, because that was a great celebration. We said, Mary, my grandchild will be starting Bedford Road next year. I was like, no way, how did that happen? How did that happen? How did that happen? So those are wonderful statements about, why people move here, and we welcome that. So again, but we couldn't do it without the partnership with everybody, and yesterday was a perfect example of that.
So it's a shout out to you guys. For folks who may not know, yesterday's celebration was celebrating the girls' soccer team, which marched their way all the way to the state championships in Section B, and came home with the state championship.
Which is awesome.
25 young women.
One of those students moved to Pleasantville a few years ago because she wanted to play soccer here.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Right.
it was both a great event and a parade up Bedford Road in the rain that was almost better because folks were out there in the rain in spite of it. But one thing I find interesting is I would have to say delighted we ended up in Pleasantville, but it was a little random, as many life decisions are, and yet I talked to a lot of folks who moved here after, as you described, a really very thoughtful process
Right.
about where they might want to live. And obviously the school district and its quality are a big primary piece of that for folks who have or are anticipating having kids. But the other piece of it that I hear all the time is folks are very much attracted to the sense of a civic center, not only as a physical thing, the farm market, the Burns Theater, restaurant, pharmacy, bookstore,
Walkability,
walking,
the train station, the
but-
whole package.
but
I call it a
the-
package.
amid the fisticuffs we always encounter on one subject or another, overall it's a community with, I think, a really deep set of civic roots. And even folks who didn't move here with that in mind notice it, and many of them are affected by it.
Right.
And I've certainly put myself in that category. So it's awfully nice to think that so many of these folks, different time, different demographic, different sets of life stories, are moving here in many ways with a very thoughtful effort to capture exactly what we have enjoyed for all these many years. And they're coming here for that, not in spite of it, not without realizing it. And so I think that's a very encouraging piece of news about keeping Pleasantville
Right,
amid
right.
these other changes.
Last year, we had a request from a group of local realtors if we could host a meeting. So we were like, well, why not? All right, so we brought them in, and we're going to repeat it again. And they had a ton of questions.
Yeah,
So
that's a
we
good
ended up creating and Emily's on the communications committee. We call it a points of pride list, or one handout. And people have been telling me, you go to open houses and they see it right there.
It's right on the table, right?
It's right on
I
the
bet.
table. So it's that level of partnership of helping a group of people who love our village of Pleasantville, who want to help tell the story of what makes Pleasantville, all the pieces of it. So there were, oh my gosh, close to 25 realtors
Yeah, if
at
you
that
think about it,
meeting.
they're
School
the
district
first
is a big-
salespeople, right? They're the first line of.
Well, that was their point.
Right.
So
We get asked the
And
question
people have
first.
a lot of questions
Yeah.
about the school district when they're thinking about moving here if they have young kids. Those are
Right.
normal questions, so
It's a good
we
idea.
may as well give them the information so that
Right
they
away.
can pass that on.
You know, the only thing worse than the uncertainty of what happens when folks move here is what we know happens if people don't. So, we're trying to manage all of that, but I will say Pleasantville is in, I think, an extraordinarily strong position
right.
amid the troubles we all have, and there are a whole lot of people in this community who struggle to live here. Two working partners in a household.
Absolutely.
Really bend over backwards to find a way to make it possible to live here, and chose to do it. It didn't just happen to them because they wanted the values we have delivered. So we're all trying to sustain that and honor it in every way we can. So, all right, fields and facilities.
Maybe before field and facilities, Pleasantville Strong could go,
Sure.
Oh, yes.
just because
We've kept
they
her
may or may
waiting.
not have people
All right,
waiting at home.
yes.
You may not have a teenager waiting at home.
All right.
Why don't you
Welcome.
come up to the
Come on up, Nicole.
podium?
Thank you,
Leave
Nicole.
Shane his microphone in case he needs it.
Nicole Malgarinos, the coordinator for, excuse me, Pleasantville Strong.
Right, and I was with Nicole and Youth Officer Joe Zane from 7 o'clock along with Emily, so she's had a long night serving in the
Youth
her
Officer Joe
wonderful
Zane,
role.
PHS, 2000, not that long ago.
I
right?
taught him too, I just
Yeah.
can't remember.
He was with my oldest.
Oh, there
He
you
was
go,
graduated
with Christopher.
My oldest
Okay.
with Christopher.
Christopher.
So thank you so much for bumping me up. I
We should have bumped you up earlier.
Right.
I'm sorry.
I appreciate
Put you
it.
last to make sure that you'd be able to speak because we
Yeah.
knew you had another event. but
Little did you know what
bumping
last
you up
meant.
I had
Yeah,
no
well,
right.
You didn't know that last
Lesson
meant
learned.
tomorrow.
You underestimated how much we can talk about the other subjects.
Lesson learned. Well, what I loved about sitting here so much is the theme of partnership and civic duty. And it's aligned with the information that I can share with you tonight around where Pleasantville Strong is now that we have walked into the last year of a 5-year grant cycle. I can share with you that we can celebrate an overall 30% reduction in all youth substance use. That is a significant number. And that number is directly related to partnership. It's related to our partnerships with PCTV, with the village, with the school district, with the Board of Education, law enforcement, our PTAs, the PCO. We all work hand in hand. It's a really unique. I meet with coalitions all across the United States a couple of times a year. And this type of sector partner development that is designed to create community environmental change is really difficult to achieve.
Right.
And we have done that here. So we should also be celebrating that. With that said, there's still some work to do. So we are going to reapply for years 6 through 10. Typically, that RFP comes out sometime in early January. Last year, it didn't come out until March, but we're not going to make that a precedent. We're not going to assume that's precedent. So we are getting prepared. We are gathering data. We are looking at our narratives. We're looking at our achievements, all of those goals and milestones that we have met, so that we're ready to write. To that end, the school district, of course, has been wonderful partners. Law enforcement gives us all kinds of de-identified information so that we can support the narrative for the RFP. But one of the pieces of data that we could really use some help with from the community is we've put together a parent survey. Some of you may have seen it go out through the school district, through the PCO, the PTA. We haven't gathered these data since 2014, and we are required to have these type of data to write the grant. Right now, I only have 150 surveys returned. And I'd like to double or triple that number. We know that we have enough parents in this community, and we ask for your help in trying to get this survey out. It's 3 minutes. Should take no more than 3 minutes. I think it's 20 questions. I'm going to end, survey end is probably somewhere in December 15th, 20th, so that I have time to unpack the data and repackage it, take a look at it, evaluate it, and see what I can, so I have enough time to use it when we write. So if the village would be willing, and the board and the school district again, to push this out, it would be extraordinarily helpful for us when we go to write.
And
Did
can
you
people
send it to me, Nicole?
I can.
Yeah.
And can
Okay.
people grab it off your site?
And we have a button on our website. So you can go to www.pleasantvillestrong.org and you can thank board member Angela Vella, who I don't know
I
if
added it myself.
everybody, she added it herself.
And I can verify that the survey is very quick. 'cause
It
I
is.
did it.
The survey is quick.
But a lot of good information can be captured by it, so it's really important.
Yeah, so we're really trying to take a look at parents' perceptions around substance use, substance use.
How about old guys like me who are parents but past the school age?
Yeah,
What do you think?
do we fill that out as well?
We're not.
Yeah, I mean, you're not really the sample that
I
we're
was afraid
looking
of
for.
that.
We're asking for.
These are not the droids. These are not the droids you're looking for. We are not the droids.
That is not to say.
Reminds me of
It's
the.
not to say that you aren't relevant, Mr. Mayor. It doesn't diminish your
Actually,
relevancy.
the better
Is that a
line in
nicer way to
Star
say
Wars
it?
is we don't
You're the
serve your
different
kind. That's right. Now she's gonna say, "Okay, boomer."
I picked up an article the other day, and the lead line was, "Getting old is everyone's favorite alternative to dying."
That's a good point.
I mean, we're pretty woke.
Right, you are.
Speak for yourself, Lauren.
Okay.
So do any of the board members have any questions about Strong or any of our initiatives, where we see anything?
I have a question.
Yes.
What do you consider the likelihood of the grant being re-upped?
I think we are really well positioned. I think that it depends on the climate. This is a federal grant. There's been a lot of energy lately around this work. So I am super optimistic. We're well positioned because of what I was describing to you before, because of this type of sector partnership development.
And it operates well. It's
And
smooth,
it
right?
runs, so smoothly now. The village being the fiscal agent is really a boon for DFC grantees. Seems to be the one stumbling block that everybody has. My partner in crime, Noreen Reagan, and I work very closely together to make sure that expenditures and budget and drawdown from the Health and Human Services payment system is like clockwork. So that
Has she
piece.
spoken to you about food scraps?
Yeah.
That's how I bring her report.
That's right. That's it.
Is the
Yes.
grant amount adjusted for inflation over the 5 years, or is it the straight?
It will not be. It'll be the same amount. It'll be $650 for 5 years.
Very good.
So,
Thank you.
I mean, at one point, I had to chat with you, and the federal budget was trying to diminish these grant monies, but it sounds like it stabilized.
I think it's stabilized. I think that. I think that again.
I think all the focus on vaping, the opioid epidemic,
I agree.
legalizing marijuana in different states. I think all of that is provoking,
It's supporting these types of initiatives for
exactly.
sure.
It's
Yeah.
like a whole lobby effort to make sure that we are, trying to keep our kids from being involved in this stuff.
Yeah,
Two
agreed.
things on that. Well, you're here, Nicole. I was going to announce this in the regular meeting announcements, but you probably know this. The county has put out 3 public service announcements, brief videos about vaping, and you can see them at the westchestergov.com site on the health department. The first focuses on the health risks of vaping in children. The second focuses on how to recognize vape devices, and the final PSA focuses on how to talk to kids about vaping. Kind of all the more important with
What's
this.
the website?
westchestergov.com, and click into the health department.
Health department.
Health department, that's what I need.
The horrifying news reports about people ending up ill or dead from the effects of vaping. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is I was on Monday at the New York Conference of Mayors Legislative Priorities meeting, and one of a group of people from across the state vote about the priorities that the New York Conference of Mayors as a group ought to lobby for. One of the items on the list was to make certain that there was a local opt-out in the event that retail marijuana was approved, which we anticipate is going to come up again in the January budget cycle. That, interestingly, among the voters who were across the state, did not achieve the top 5. doesn't mean NICOM doesn't have that as a priority among 50, but it didn't achieve the top 5, which was interesting to me. So I did.
Well, I'm excited that the conversation is happening.
It is going
because
on.
that conversation is happening and continues. We need to continue to have the dialogue around marijuana
And
policy.
I mean, as you can imagine, it feels very different in the wide open spaces of central New York than it does in a dense place like ours. So.
Right.
All right. Any other thoughts on?
Yeah, I'm just curious to get a bit of an overview. So Peter mentioned all the sad news around vaping. I wonder if vaping has gone down since that's happened, and just more generally, like, obviously it's a moving target you're dealing with. What you see as the biggest challenges coming up in this next sort of 5-year cycle that you're planning towards?
Right. So a couple of things. Vaping we happened upon us so quickly. It's an emerging trend. We dealt with it as an emerging trend, and again to partnership. A lot of the data that we have, it was qualitative, narrative data, and so sometimes we know with some substances that kids think everybody is doing it, and then we get this outcome measurement data that says, well, most kids are making healthy choices. So I say that by way of trying to explain that we don't have really the outcome measurement data. Right? So the last time we surveyed our kids, we had just put vaping, it was the first time it was on the Prevention Needs Assessment Survey, right, for that larger sample, because it hadn't existed. It came on so quickly. And so we will be resurveying this fall, and that'll give us some good data around if those numbers have gone up. And then you also have to think about, is that just because we have more information?
Right.
Is
there an information bias there?
Right, is there information bias? And also, there's a cultural piece for kids. So what we know now that we didn't know when it was first, coming forward as a substance for kids, is that when we ask kids questions about vaping, hookah, and e-cigs on the Prevention Needs Assessment Survey, what we didn't realize is that kids who juul don't think of themselves as kids who vape. That's a completely different culture in their mind, and they reject that. I'm not a vapor. I juul. So we had to learn as adults and catch up with the culture around this, and it's moving so quickly.
To be able to ask the right questions.
Right, to even be able to frame it. Right. Exactly.
The brand has become a verb. Huh?
Right. So to the second piece of your question, we will continue. Our student assistance counselor, the very first thing that the school district had her do this year in the first month of school was go into classrooms, go into health classes, start that conversation, do the educational awareness piece on vaping. She also gets a lot of really good data that way as well. Kids share. And they really do, particularly in conversation, when they feel like you're interested in hearing about what's going on with them. And we will continue to do parent forums. I have an intern at the high school right now who is looking at all of the social media platforms that youth are on that parents are unaware of, and he's compiling all of the marketing of vape devices that hit those sites, like Snapchat. Is the same intern who did a community environmental survey for me this summer on vape products. And, continue to have education for parents as well. So we're on it. Okay?
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Yes.
Okay, so not only am I a school board member, but I'm lucky enough to serve on the steering committee for Pleasantville Strong. And I think, Nicole, you brought up a very important point. I think it was you asking about, or who was it you, Steve? Who asked how much is the next grant? Is it likely for us to get it?
Yeah, that was me.
That was Steve. Sorry, Nicole, to give you credit and then take it away.
That's fine. We're all in the same boat.
Let's go to the videotape.
But what's important, I think, is that whether or not we get the money or not, we're already thinking about that and have been. So one of the things that I always say about Pleasantville Strong is it came out of the strategic plan, and part of the strategic plan was looking at things long term and knowing that you couldn't fit something into one fiscal year and trying to figure out how to fit it into 5. So a lot of the great work that Pleasantville Strong does over time, we're trying to make sure the program's sustainable, because even at the end of 10 years, if you're successful enough to get all that money, right, you're out of funds, and what do you do then?
Now what?
So over this period, hopefully it's 10, but if it's only 5, we'll still have done some good work. We've been trying to figure out ways to make it more sustainable. So when it comes to the counselor in the school, for example, Marianne Flatley, over the years, we've tried and have it fit into the school budget a little bit more every year, so that less of the burden is on Pleasantville
Got it.
Strong and more is on.
Which
so
makes
that
it more
at the-
sustainable down the road.
Exactly, and if you wanted to speak a little bit about the sustainability, that's why I came up.
Well, you just did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So ultimately, this grant in the federal government, it is not a funding source, and the federal government expects you, by developing these relationships in the local sector, to be able to implement programming that will continue to move on. Now, I can share with you that is already happening. So you think about, in the very beginning, we would have a school-based events where we would bring a speaker in, and Strong would pay for it completely. Now we have the PCO perhaps picking up half, or the PTA picking up half, or SEPTA. So that's the goal there, is ultimately to get enough people to grow your capacity, right, in your sector partner development, to be able to make sure that these programs remain in the village. And, as well as exploring a not-for-profit arm as well, which is the work of the steering committee. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
It does. Years
Yes.
ago in a previous government life, I actually had to do some work with the federal government, and that's one of the hallmarks they look for.
Yes.
Are these folks incorporating, what they're gaining into their future
Right.
programming and budgeting for it, So it becomes a feather in your cap, and that's one of the things they will look for in a decision to continue funding this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they actually look at our capacity and do a comparative analysis, and that's one of the reasons they do that, to see that growth. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
you.
Nicole.
Good night.
Thank you, Nicole, for all your hard work. Thank you.
Okay, fields and facilities, on our side, I don't too much to say. We are at the moment collecting bids to put permanent lights on Parkway back. Not the huge towers that we have up front, but smaller towers, poles with LED lights that would give us practice level lighting in the back, which would not only be better and easier to manage, but then we wouldn't have to rent the portable gizmos that we've been renting last couple of seasons in order to make it possible for teams to practice in the back. Much more use back there, driven by the goal of trying to protect the front field a bit and get some practice off it. We are...
Are you looking as part of that bid at potential lights for the front? We had spoken about this.
We're not...
Not the huge ones,
Right.
but can we?
We're not at the moment.
Can you at least get a pricing so that if, Dad's Club wanted to,
Where would they go? In the front?
potentially along the fence to give more light to that side?
baseball
fence
side?
along the, along Holly
Baseball.
Street,
Got it.
Hopper Street.
Hopper Street,
Yeah.
sorry.
Right.
I get those two mixed up all the
We can
time.
look
So
at
like
that.
the right field line of the baseball diamond.
Yes.
Facing
Yes.
Marble Avenue. Okay.
We got trees there. I don't know. We'll look.
We'd spoken
Yes, we
at our
did.
agenda
Yeah.
meeting that
Yes.
that you mentioned that you would.
Yes.
You could find out
Yes.
how much that would be to add in. Like if you're already doing
Yeah.
this work, it might not be
Have to get power.
that much more to.
I'm not sure
Yeah, I
that.
don't know
Yeah,
about the
whatever.
power,
Yes.
where that would
I
be, how
understand
much
the
that
issue.
would cost, but
So
something we'd be
Okay,
interested in
um,
finding out.
we continue to invest in field maintenance. This year, the center of the football field got beat up a little more than last year. Some of that is the randomness of the weather and how the games go, and some of it is, we look every year, and now Matt Trainer is our Parks and Rec guy, is very much focused along with Mario and the team on ways we can improve that. We're adding blankets.
Field blankets.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah, we've done that on our high school
Are they on already?
Yeah.
high school backfield, our softball field, like the outfield area where we have soccer, and it's really made a huge
difference.
to that
field
section
blanket.
of the middle
high school back.
part of the high
Yeah,
school.
huge
Yeah,
difference.
It's basically the outfield of our softball diamond.
Right.
But it's used for soccer as
Pretty
well.
heavily, right?
Pardon
High
me?
school back is pretty heavy soccer, right?
Yes,
yeah, there's a lot of
in the
soccer
fall,
that goes on
lots.
there in the fall.
But that blanket
Apparently it
makes a
pays
big
off.
But it
difference.
makes a
Just
big,
won the championship.
but it makes a big difference.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
does, yeah.
those blankets
does.
really help.
Yeah.
You can see the greenness when they
Yeah,
take it
no, when you
off.
take it off.
You can see by the color of the grass how much
Yeah.
healthier
Yeah.
it is.
So would that revive my own lawn?
Potentially.
So the other thing on our list for in time for the next football season is we're going to pave a blacktop path that goes from the bathroom area in that little plaza behind the bleachers, connects to
That's
the
great.
ADA
Thank you.
ramp at the far end of the bleachers, and then to the bridge ramp that takes you over to the parking lot.
Yeah, that'd be great to have
That's
for
great.
the soccer
Thank
season
you.
when they're practicing or playing
Right,
on that
so-
backfield. That diamond, the baseball diamond, that's
Yeah.
on that side. That'll be very helpful.
So we ended up, as everyone knows, the new bleachers, a long, little bit tortured process, as all those things are,
Right.
but have new bleachers, and people still stand in the front.
No, don't say that to me. I do want to thank
Yeah.
the village, though,
Yeah.
for the partnership, and it
was
was
great
great, and
partnership and how we
just
got
the
that put
concrete
together.
pad, everybody, Steve and Jeffy Conham working together, and everything coming together, and we had a couple of bumps and twists, but
Yeah.
I don't know anything we do that doesn't have a bump or a twist in
wouldn't
it,
be
but
life.
good people
Yeah.
of good intention make it all work out, and it was wonderful, so
Well, and a
thank you
shout
so
out to
much.
the Dad's Club folks, Jay LaCapria.
Oh,
and
my
his
gosh,
crew,
and- yeah.
who not only are helpful in all kinds of ways, but
Will
have made
Collins and-
investments.
Well, and Will
Yes.
Collins in
Yeah.
his efforts to get the grants that,
No
that,
doubt. So-
you know, paid for a huge portion of it.
So,
it's a big help.
I do
Community
think
effort.
we're seeing, really positive incremental progress
Great.
all along there. And likewise, we're looking at improved maintenance and things we can do at Soldiers and Sailors and at Roselle, and putting down a whole lot more seed and the like than we used to. It turns out that one of the answers to this is just constantly be making these little slices in the earth and sticking seed down into it. So
Yeah.
Right, right. And we increased on our campus, we changed and widened the path between the country club and the main campus.
right.
Can you pave that?
Yeah, and we paved it, and, well, we had different types of paving, but we basically made it much wider and open, and, that's always, and Eric is here, it's something we talk about in terms of safety, because that's open during the school day. It's open during the school day, and I know it's a place where people walk through and head to the train station, and, I see people out there trying to walk their dogs, and that technically isn't allowed, for a lot of reasons. And so we try to keep an eye on that. We try to manage that, and we try to be good neighbors in the spirit of everything. So, the second you do something like that, it sets up another level of expectation. But again, we're keeping an eye on that. Right.
And then we have some potential work with our bond to redo the tennis courts.
Right.
New fencing with electronic access, so hopefully community members could use it more than is feasible now.
On the tennis courts?
Yeah.
Use the tennis
Yeah.
courts, yeah.
It's been interesting.
We've had a lot of
we've-
requests
We've
for
had
that,
more
and-
interest in the public tennis courts after a good long period when there seemed to be less. So it's
Right.
interesting that it's swinging back.
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, we just have to keep an eye on, skateboards on there, things like that will do damage to it. And, so it's important that we have the community support in using these facilities in the way that they're intended, so that we can maintain them and we don't have to redo them sooner than we should have to. So we ask for the communities, we're all for sharing and allowing people to use the facilities, but we ask that people be respectful and use them in the proper way.
We resurfaced the tennis courts up at Foxwood, the public tennis courts adjacent to Foxwood, and striped for pickleball as well, because
Right.
folks were interested in pickleball, so.
Nice.
I think it's also important to talk about the gyms. Very often we talk about the fields and things that are outside of the schools and the public, but we don't talk about the gyms, and the 3 gyms that we have are the only gyms in the community. And, you know, that's part of the school budget, and we did recently resurface them. And I just wanted to bring that up, that we're
Right.
taking care of our facilities as well.
Right. And in addition, thank you, Shane, and I should, people always think about the spring and the fall, but there's an entire winter season, and if you walk through our schools in winter, you will see every gym in full use of every kind of program from all kinds of kids using it and different community groups, and actually, gave a tour, like I said earlier, to a prospective family who thinking of moving into, and I went downstairs to the wrestling room, and that starts, and Dad's Club has 2 programs there, and I love to see that feeder into it. So again, very, 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 very busy winters inside the schools, and that's a really good thing. It's a great thing.
All right, anything more on fields and facilities? So the last thing on our list was pedestrian safety, safe routes to school. You want to talk about that, Nicole?
Sure. Shane and I are teaming up. We're on 2 different committees together now. We're both on Pleasantville Walks, the pedestrian committee, and also the Climate Smart committee, which the village was just, you may have seen this, certified bronze. After our evaluation of the things that we've done to reduce our carbon footprint, and Shane has joined the group as well now to represent the school. Anyway, I just thought I would mention that. So Pleasantville Walks, our pedestrian committee, is a relatively new committee. It's been going for a little bit over a year. I guess the thing to discuss in the context of this joint meeting is this Safe Routes map that they've put together. So the Pleasantville Walks basically has 2 mandates. One is to work on improving pedestrian safety, and the other is to encourage people to walk. So Mary, you mentioned the sort of walkability of Pleasantville earlier. We feel that it's a very important dimension to what Pleasantville is, and we would like it to make it easier for people to walk, and that of course includes kids. I've mentioned this a number of times, but Shane, who grew up in Pleasantville, has mentioned the fact that when he was a kid, everybody walked to school, and the culture has changed, of course, now that a lot more people drive, and some of that is because people live in areas of town where there aren't sidewalks, or it's difficult for the kids to walk for whatever reasons. There's more traffic, and some of it is just the culture. So this group has been brainstorming different ways to encourage kids to walk, and one of them is this map that they put together. They've worked in coordination with the police department. I know that they've met with you guys as well to discuss different safe routes that children can walk on their way to school, and also the possibility of some drop-off points. So I actually don't know what the latest is in terms of how they've coordinated with you guys to talk about how to put out this information, whether it's going to be done online, or whether it's going to be sort of a handout that goes home and so on. So maybe you guys want to take it up from here, or Shane, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
I can.
Okay.
Okay, so it's been an interesting process, and they've been looking at a lot of different things. So I'm essentially the liaison, so I go to most of their meetings, and what they're trying to do is figure out, as you mentioned, how to get people safely to school and make it possible for more people to walk, and are there ways potentially to unlock certain neighborhoods whereby more of them felt more comfortable walking, and at least the parents felt it was safe enough. One of the things they did was to create a map that had several zones in it, and actually we were able then, with Angela's help, she wrote a program to do this, actually run all the students through the program and figure out what zone they were in. And even further than that, broke it down by school. So you could see how many Bedford Road students, how many middle school students, how many high school students, to get a sense. And now we can do that because we've created this map, these zones, and figured out what streets are in them and what addresses are in them. We can now run it every year and see over time if demographics are changing or not changing.
Demand is.
So the reason for doing that was to kind of look at different crosswalks in different areas to try and determine, gee, are those crosswalks really the most utilized ones or not? And so we just completed this, and the committee hasn't discussed it yet, but we'll
Or if
soon be
there's enough
discussing.
students going through a certain zone, maybe it's worthwhile to put in a crosswalk somewhere. You know, it can open
They
up a
might
lot of
be
possibilities.
making recommendations. There hasn't been a
Right.
full deep dive into this, but I can say just preliminarily, and I think Angela and our board who have seen the map and the numbers, I was pretty surprised where some of the higher numbers were. It turns out that the zone where Maple to Brentwood, that area has the most, that zone has the most students in the entire school district.
Yeah, like
Yep.
Skytop and.
Right, that area, right near you.
Near me, yeah.
Right, now, interesting, and then the second biggest is by Locust. I really thought, but this other district that I just mentioned is a lot bigger, actually, than the Locust
Right.
issue.
Zone.
So there's a lot
Yeah.
more people coming
one.
down Bedford
I'm a
Road.
zone 1 guy.
Yes, you're a zone one guy.
It's like
I've always thought of you
How I
that
roll,
way.
yo. I took some pride
You
in
just
that
seemed like a
facility.
So
one guy.
hopefully over time, as we start to analyze these numbers and figure them out better, we can see if there are ways to reallocate.
Crossing guards, crosswalks.
I thought you were
If it
going to
makes
say
sense.
reallocate students, like they have to move.
Make them move, yeah.
I mean, because what we want to
Soviet
do,
Union tried that with limited success.
what we want to do is we want to try and
Forced
figure out ways, again, to unlock neighborhoods so that more people can walk to school. So it's not necessary to drive and, to have, the traffic issues that we have. Another thing that we've discussed a little bit but haven't really gotten into, but I think is really interesting and I'll bring up here, is potentially looking at, the streetscape in Pleasantville. And if you look at Academy now, for example, by Bedford Road, that's one way for certain hours, right, for safety. I know that it's very expensive when we've looked in certain areas of trying to add sidewalks, and sometimes there are residents who are opposed to it because then they have to maintain them. And sometimes it's price prohibitive because of how much it would cost to install those sidewalks. So looking at, the central business district and maybe streets that are further out, and deciding maybe some of those could be one way at certain hours of the day, so that people could use bikes or walk more safely. So I think there's a lot of things that can be looked at. Currently, the pedestrian committee is working with their point people, are our assistant principals. So they just had a meeting with the assistant principal from the high school, from the middle school, from the Bedford Road School, and they're starting to liaise and have more conversations about what information they would like, how best to get it out, the discussions that we need to have, and then bring back to you. I know, you have a question?
Oh, no, I was just wondering, is there any conclusion about when the kids are going to get the maps at this point?
From
And
the
are there
email-
going to be Pokemon stops on the maps?
I don't know about Pokemon stuff. I think
is
that the
where I am
goal
at.
is to get everything done by the spring. Maybe have in the spring some sort of day where, it gets discussed and people learn about safe ways to walk to school and kind of
Okay.
get it on everybody's radar, so that from the spring going over the summer and into the fall, we can really start everything from day one when school starts
Yeah.
next year. But, use the spring as a training and educational
Okay.
period to really launch it in the fall.
Yeah.
It'd be great to have an event at school and bring
It would be
people
great.
in
Yeah,
and
make a
talk
deal
about
about
it.
it.
Right.
I mean, we talked about how exciting it'll be for the kids. I think particularly the younger kids just to have the map itself. Like I remember I feel like it's a developmental thing when you go to a zoo and your kid is at that age where they really want to be the one with the map, showing you how to get to a certain place. So I feel like there's that dimension to it. And I know we sort of talked about ways of getting into the classroom or having an event or something like that, so that the kids really feel empowered by this.
And I have to say that Jeff Econom has done a great job working with the county in getting us maps that are really high quality. They have such detail. It's amazing. Even on a small printout, you can almost see where every house is.
Yeah,
it's pretty
impressive.
He's done great work, and I'm really excited for some of the maps. And I know that at one particular meeting, and maybe we should bring it up now, the mayor had talked about cost and printing out. Did you come to a final understanding of it? You asked me straight up at a meeting, are you guys going to go halvesies? And I was not in the position to do that. So
I realize I didn't price it out, but it will be inexpensive, and we will go halvesies. So
You're saying that without
we're talking a couple $100 or something. Are you in for a couple $100? All right, we got it done.
Okay, all right.
How many do you want, Mr. McGaffey?
I don't know how we need. What do we need? Like
I'll figure it out.
1,800?
We'll figure it out. Well, we got to think about how we want to roll it out.
Yeah.
And
Right.
Another
How
thing,
many
while
weeks?
I'm up here, and I'll just bring it up, and I know that I mentioned this to Eric, and I know he has the answer, so in the spirit of no surprises, one of the things that this board, one of the things that I know the Board of Education is very interested in is we use, the
crosswalk on Bedford.
the crosswalk on Bedford,
To get
the
to
Soldier and
Soldiers and
Sailors
Sailors.
Field,
I
the
was gonna ask
schools use
about
that
that.
for practice for
So
some of the
so
modified
Bedford is a
teams.
county road there, so you expressed
I'll let
that you
Angela
needed to
take
get
over. Thank you.
information from
So they're scheduled to
them.
repave this upcoming spring, summer.
Okay.
So we've been heavily involved in the design process requesting this crosswalk. So it looks as if it's made it into one of the final iterations of the design, but it would be on Bedford Road at Clark Street, on the north
Okay.
side of Clark Street.
Great.
So
Okay.
the county's been supportive. It
Great.
looks
Yeah.
good right now,
And-
but
Yeah, it's
Just
all about
as a
pedestrian
history,
safety.
well, the reason that this came up is because we have students that go from Ashland Avenue from the middle school, and they have practice at Soldiers and Sailors Field for softball, soccer, field hockey, some of our modified sports practice there. So this would just make it a lot safer for them to get across
Absolutely.
Bedford Road there.
yep.
So you said the northern side of Clark Street?
Yes.
On Bedford Road.
On Bedford Road, right.
So towards the old village.
So
Right.
So you'd
eastern
cross and
side.
you'd be on the
Like
same
same
side
side
as
As
Soldiers.
Soldiers and Sailors.
Right, and that's the point. You didn't want
Oh,
to
that's
bring
actually a
students
safer
on
way.
one side.
I
of
mean,
the
there
road.
is a
Just have just one
crosswalk
spot.
across Clark Street
Yeah.
there, but it makes more sense just to put it so they're on the right side.
Right, so you'd have to cross the street twice.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for
Thank
following
you.
up on that. We
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
All right. Any further
That was
report
my-
on that?
that was my only
So,
question,
I mean,
so
a shout out
Thanks for bringing it up, Shane.
to everybody on the Pedestrian Safety Committee. I mean, Carrie Roberts has been the chair of that, but a whole bunch of people really have proposed this and taken the ball and run with it. And obviously, this is one result of it, and there are other things in the hopper as well. So thank you for that. I think we've come to the end of our
Agenda?
agenda.
Really?
Could that be? There's something else?
Record.
No, I think we're good.
Is there any further comment from the public? I think we've pretty much outlasted the public here.
The first time.
Okay.
Well,
I just have one,
Yes.
one short, quick comment. Last Friday, I received an invitation to attend a roundtable hosted by the New York State Comptroller's Office about school safety. And I have to give a great shout out to Eric Gretzner and his staff, because we are so fortunate here in Pleasantville to have a great working relationship with our chief of police and the police department. And it was just emblematic. It showed up at this roundtable with the Comptroller's Office. And again, we are eternally grateful for that relationship. So Eric, thank you for everything that you do for keeping our community safe and working with us in the school district. It's terrific. And I noted it last week with the Comptroller's Office.
well, and obviously you all know this, we all know it. It isn't that we always agree, and there are always points of friction in every relationship, but it's a pretty good team effort here in the village of Pleasantville, and that is not the case in lots of
Everywhere.
places
No, it's not.
in our
You know,
in our word.
Correct.
One of the things I've been finding myself reading about lately is how New York City got its water supply. and some of the machinations that went into that. And, when we drive by Katona or we go visit Katona, we need to remember that's really Katona 2.0.
Right.
Right? I mean, there was once a time where to get water to New York City, these people who knew nothing of that situation in this village in a valley were told, in a couple of months, you better be out of here because
you're gonna
this
drown.
is going to be a reservoir.
Yeah.
Right,
you know?
exactly.
And so, when you look at the level of coordination here, and I know from talking to some law enforcement in town, our police study what goes on when things don't go right in other places and debrief on that and analyze and think and consider and plan. And that's all you can do is really partner, share information, and coordinate. And so that's, that's all to the good. So, I think we're in a really unique situation in Pleasantville where people do communicate. Sometimes they tussle, but we get things resolved, and we work for the common good. So we thank you.
And likewise, right back at you. And Chief Kretzner, still in the audience after all these hours. Shout out to you for what you and your team do, and for the strong relationship, not only with lots of places in the community, but particularly with the schools. Even as we've morphed through several different youth officers, always a strong relationship, and helped out leading the victorious soccer team back at 10 at night the other night. So,
Yes.
That's great.
small town living.
Yep.
So, all right, I thank you all.
Thank
we look
you.
forward to visiting
Thank
you
you.
next year.
Thank you.
Until we meet again. We unfortunately have resolutions. You're welcome to stay for them. I
I'm
just
really
want you to
excited.
know.
I'm sure you guys,
Yeah,
Well, I live
We have to sit through enough of our own.
yeah, you guys know a little bit
I think
about
we're
this.
good.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
All right. Shall we just rip right through them?
Let's rip right through them. I like that idea.
All right. 280,
Mr.
David.
Morrissey.
Yeah.
It's gonna be
Whereas
weird. We're out of
Pleasantville
cadence.
Strong, Safe Teens, Real Opportunities, New Goals is federally funded drug-free community coalition with the Village of Pleasantville, whose mission is to reduce underage drinking, drug use, and other unhealthy behaviors by our youth within our community. And whereas the Village of Pleasantville has provided fiscal agency to Pleasantville Strong DFC grant SB 020760 since the grant was awarded to the village in 2015. Whereas Pleasantville Strong will be submitting a no-cost extension and a competing DFC continuation grant proposal upon the announcement release of the RFP for years 6 to 10. Whereas Pleasantville Strong requests that the village remain the fiscal agent upon the award of the no-cost extension and/or the DFC grant, and now therefore it be resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby approves the request from Pleasantville Strong to continue as the fiscal agency for Pleasantville Strong upon the award of a DFC grant no-cost extension and/or a fully funded DFC continuation award.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? I think Eric and Noreen have worked well with Nicole. All systems go?
All systems go.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. 281, Nicole.
Whereas the Village of Pleasantville seeks to enter into an agreement with the Pleasantville Union Free School District concerning public and student safety, and now therefore be it resolved that the Village Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby authorizes the execution of an agreement with the Board of Education of the Pleasantville Union Free School District concerning public and student safety. Be it further resolved that the Village Board of Trustees hereby authorizes and empowers the village administrator to sign the agreement and take all necessary steps to implement the purpose of this resolution. And be it further resolved that the agreement with the Board of Education of the Pleasantville Union Free School District shall be subject to review and approval by the village administrator and the village attorney as to form and substance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comment on that, Mr. Bill Administrator?
The police chief has been working with the superintendent of schools on safety initiatives, and they've made progress. We want authorization to finalize that when the time comes. So, again, good progress, good relationship. All things are moving.
So it's kind of an
towards a positive.
open-ended agreement.
Exactly.
Any further comment on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. 282. Steve.
Steve.
Steve, resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the appointment of Jeannette Andre as school crossing guard, job code 0141, hourly rate of $20.62, effective November 26, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Welcome, Jeannette. 283, David.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby appoints William Dompieri as Recreation Assistant Part-Time for the Recreation Department, job code 0629 at the hourly rate of $18, effective November 26, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Welcome, William. Nicole, 284.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the appointment of Christiana Zenner to the Climate Smart Committee for the current term through April 2020. And I'll just say that Christiana Zenner is a professor at Fordham University who specializes in the environment and ethics and water in particular. And so I think it's exciting that we're able to include her.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Is there
in
a
this
second?
effort.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Welcome, Professor Zenner. Thank you for your willingness to participate. 285, Steve.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator to accept the proposal from Barile, Gallagher and Associates, consulting engineers, to conduct an evaluation of the Village Hall HVAC systems for a fee of $5,000 plus agreed upon additional fee schedule as attached.
Is there a second?
Second.
Eric,
Is this the never-ending?
the never-ending
I mean,
HVAC system.
Really?
Yeah, we have been having some issues over the past year and a half with the
About
HVAC system.
the last 10 years, it seems.
Yeah, well, definitely predates me.
I mean, we spent a lot of money.
We spent a lot
some years
of
back.
money.
And it seems to be a patchwork design that nobody really truly understands. So we want to engage. Robert Hughes is essentially the building manager for Village Hall. So he's been engaged in the HVAC and dealing with the services. And each year that number goes up. They come to visit.
The end goal
And,
for this is to then be able to go out and effectively bid for a new service contract.
right.
Okay.
And we can't do that until we fully understand the HVAC system
Do
that we have.
we feel $5,000 is a lot of money to just get somebody to come look at it?
Well, it's not just to look at it, it's to evaluate, see what's existing, see what's connected to what. We had Robert Hughes take a look at this. He thinks it's a fair number.
What do you think?
I think it probably is. It's a complicated system involving crawling around in a lot of different places. Barile Gallagher is obviously a Pleasantville entity. Lawrence Barile and his partner built and occupy the second floor of the building that has Southern Table in it, and he's a Pleasantville resident, and I think a very reliable firm. So,
And again, Robert Hughes deals with the issues and calls out for service contracts. He's saying what we're spending on it, this is a good investment in our time and money, and would be helpful in his efforts as
Okay.
well.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. 280.
Sort of, I guess I have to say.
You could vote no if you want.
Well, I just
it's
think
going to
it's one of
pass
these
without
consulting things. Yeah, thank you. It's one of these consulting things where, hey, I'm going to come, I'm going to get guitars, I'm going to tell you what you need to now go do. But, okay,
I
fine.
you. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
You said aye.
I did say
All
aye.
right, great.
David, 286.
David, 286. Thank you.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby approves the minutes of the meeting held on November 14th, 2019 attached.
Is there a second?
Second.
I missed that meeting because I was at the WMO meeting. So that is not, it was not Monday, November 14th,
No, it was the
That's
Thursday.
true. It was the Thursday. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's Thursday, the 17th, was it?
No, it was the 14th. It
Just wasn't a
Oh,
Monday.
It was
oh.
a Wednesday, wasn't it?
Okay, so,
Well, it
so
was
it's
Thursday.
Thursday, November 14. And the minutes should be correctly
Right.
reflected. It says Monday in the minutes.
Oh, just on the header?
No, in the minutes
It
themselves.
says November 14th.
In the minutes themselves, it says Monday, and it
Oh,
should say
okay.
Thursday.
I will correct that.
All right,
President
mover and seconder
Stargiotti.
is okay with that?
President Stargiotti
Yes.
presiding.
Yes.
That was an hour and a half shorter than this meeting. so-
Yeah.
I mean, we flew that one. That was a good one.
Are you blaming me, Vinjamori?
No?
Yeah. Two things to be said about that. One is Trustee Asquith stated that the annual holiday sing is at the intersection of Manville and Great Oak is scheduled for Tuesday, December 3. And we will not be back among you before then, so Tuesday, December 3 at 7 p.m. For the lighting and lighting ceremony and sing-along. Also, Nicole reminded folks that the first edition of Pleasantville Posts is out, mostly available online at pleasantville-ny.gov. And a second edition is anticipated fairly soon, right?
In January, I
Yeah.
believe.
Okay. All right. All in favor as amended?
Aye.
Motion approved. Rebecca got
287 me.
Okay, thank you. I got knocked out of Novus here. I'm back, yes.
Although if somebody else wants to take it. All right. Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the abstract for payment of claims dated November 25th, 2019 for fiscal year 2020, covering check numbers 95329 to 95429 as listed below. From the general fund, $245,222.38. From the special purpose fund, $630. From the water fund, $141,139.07. From the capital fund, $250. From the refuse fund, $19,310.92, for a total of $406,554.37.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved.
288, Steve.
288, Steve.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the resignation of Lisa Fiore, Recreation Assistant, Clinton Street Center, effective November 15, 2019, with the letter attached.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Lisa, for your service. We wish you good luck in your future endeavors. 289, David.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves a request from the Pleasantville Chamber of Commerce to provide one village employee on overtime for 4 hours and 2 parking passes in support of the Music in the Village holiday event on Saturday, December 14th, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
That's consistent with past years. Eric?
Yes.
Okay. The Chamber of Commerce organizes an event on that Saturday in an effort to encourage folks to shop downtown Pleasantville. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. 290, Nicole.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby authorizes the establishment of a petty cash fund in the amount of $100 for the 2020 Pleasantville Music Festival for the sole purpose of making change.
Is there a second?
Second.
Pretty straightforward. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion
Aye.
approved. 291.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator to sign the proposal with Frederick P. Clark and Associates to conduct a study of the relocation of the bus stops in Memorial Plaza for a fee of $4,200.
Is there a second?
Second.
So this reflects a proposal on our side to move the bus stops from their current location over near Bedford Road and Memorial Plaza to the gazebo area. Have I got that right, Eric?
That is correct.
And in order to do that, it is prudent to hire a...
Yeah, we have a lot going on in that little area. I mean, I think from the surface it looks like the right move, but with the post office, they've got trucks coming in and out of that area.
Right.
We've got pedestrians crossing there. It'll be home to the new pedestrian pathway built at 70 Memorial. It is in our best interest to move forward with a professional traffic
Can we
analysis.
move the bus stop on our own?
Yeah, we've been working with the county.
We have?
Yeah.
the Beeline bus folks.
Yep.
They don't.
They're supportive
They
of
don't
it.
own that?
No.
Okay.
No.
And this fee seems like a reasonable amount?
It does. They came in with a lower fee with less of an analysis, so we asked them to expand the scope to the evening rush and to include post office traffic as well.
Okay.
So among the benefits of this, if it works out, is that the gazebo would actually be a place of refuge in wet weather while waiting for the bus. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. That was the last of our resolutions. Is there any new business? Comment from the public? A reminder of 2 things. One is the tree lighting, as I just mentioned.
What time was that again?
It is Tuesday, December 3 at 7 p.m. At the Tree Island at Edgewood. And then our next regular meeting is on Monday, December 9 work session at 7 p.m., regular session at 8, and that is the youth recognition night. Am I right?
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
A voice is heard. So with that, those of you who are still with us, I thank you for your attention. Chief Eric Grutzner is still with us. I thank you for your perseverance. Thanks to the school district. Thanks to Abby from the Examiner. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night. See you on December 9th.